everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
JJK, Naoya Zenin Reborn as a Woman, Chapter 55 to 71, Juvenile Delinquent, Bonus Chapter, Zenin Underclassman. As you can see, spring came and went, and I've moved up to second year now. It might not be obvious at a glance, but second years actually get a different uniform. Same color, just a better cut, more fitted at the waist. I've attached some photos, me and my friends at school, and the desserts from when we went out for dinner. How do they look? Cute, right? I keep thinking, wouldn't it be nice if you were in these pictures too, wearing the same uniform? Zenin Underclassman, are you really, truly not going to consider transferring to our school? Everyone here is so friendly. When was the last time we saw each other? Over a year ago now, wasn't it? We keep in touch online, but I've started to miss you a little. When can we meet up again? Oh, I just realized I've never known your birthday. I wanted to get you a gift before, and then realized I had absolutely no idea when it was. That felt a bit like a shame. Busy lately. Maybe another time. My Rico's message had been sent 12 hours ago. Naoya Zenin stared at the faint glow of her flip phone screen, pressing the keys one character at a time to tap out her reply. Once she hit send, she snapped the phone shut and shoved it back into her pocket. She reached up and tugged the brim of her hood down, burying the better half of her face deeper into shadow. Only her eyes remained visible, fixed, unblinking, trained on the Tokyo streetscape sliding past the taxi window. Excuse me, miss, you've been here for quite a while now, that'll be 2,000 yen. The girl was wearing a baggy black hoodie, hood pulled all the way up and a white surgical mask covering her face, leaving almost nothing exposed, only a few strands of thick black hair with gold highlights spilling out from under the hood's edge. The whole get-up looked like someone desperately trying not to be recognized. The driver's heart was doing uneasy things. How old was she? Her build said 11 or 12, but the whole vibe she gave off was closer to a delinquent 15 or 16-year-old. Was she one of those junior crime gang types? Like a Bosazoku small, but absolutely vicious when they decided to go after someone vulnerable. Don't talk. I'm waiting for someone. Keep the car here, I'll pay the extra when I'm done. So aggressive. Definitely a juvenile delinquent. The driver's whole body gave a small shudder, and he quietly stretched a hand toward his phone, thinking he'd slip in a call to the police. But in the very next second, the girl in the back seat seemed to catch something, her spine snapped straight, and before the driver could even react, she had already wrenched the car door open and was gone. A few banknotes fluttered through the air and landed in his lap. He fumbled to catch them, and by the time he looked up, the strange girl had vanished without a trace. You're the one from the Kamo family. The voice, carrying a slight echo, drifted through the abandoned corridor and reached her ears. Kamo Kunishiro stopped dead in her tracks, snapping her gaze toward the darkness at the far end of the hallway. You're from the Zenin estate. I've heard a great deal about you. The derelict building was strewn with construction debris, and the weak flicker of a lowly cursed spirit darted through the shadows before vanishing. The Kamo clan sorcerer lifted her eyes toward the indistinct silhouette lurking in the dark. Strange, she hadn't heard of any particularly notable female sorcerers from the Zenin estate. Kunishiro steadied herself and asked again, why did you suddenly change the meeting place to somewhere like this? No particular reason. Naoya's voice came from the dark. I happened to pass by and noticed there was a cursed spirit inside. Used it to stretch my legs a bit. Ah, so that explained it. Only now did Kamo Kunishiro register the residual cursed contamination hanging in the air all around her. Grade 1. Semi-grade 1. A spirit that powerful, lurking in an abandoned building on a Tokyo street corner. Whatever its rank, exorcising something like that would have cost even Kunishiro herself a brutal fight. It seemed she could not afford to underestimate this person. Did you foresee, a full year in advance, that Master Tengen would require the star plasma vessel merger at this exact time? Kunishiro considered for a moment before asking. Information of this caliber was of course something the three great clans had every right to share, and besides, news of the merger had already spread widely enough that it could hardly be called a secret. Still, having anticipated the situation an entire year ahead of time was, frankly, uncanny. More or less, yes. The figure stepped slowly out of the shadows. The sight that greeted Kamo Kunishiro made her pupils contract. A slender, dark-haired girl, and even behind the surgical mask and hood, there was no concealing just how young she was. She looked so slight, so fragile. But the residual cursed contamination that continued to cling to the air around them refused to let the mind grow careless. "Hey, do you have a phone? One that can get online?" Kamo Kunishiro blinked, then dug her device out of her jacket pocket. But the girl from the Zenin estate frowned at the sight of it. "That thing can't connect to the internet, can it? Look at mine instead." Naoya held her own phone out in front of Kamo Kunishiro, and as Kunishiro's eyes fell on the web page displayed on the small screen, the words left Naoya's mouth almost involuntarily: bounty. Amai Rico. 30 million, 48 hours. The star plasma vessel has a bounty on her head. Wait a moment. Is this the opportunity you mentioned? You want us to go and kill the star plasma vessel? Unless you have no idea how important Master Tengen actually is. Kamo Kunishiro narrowed her eyes, irritation surfacing on her face. Naoya waved it off without concern. No, this person is not the star plasma vessel Master Tengen prepared for himself. She is nothing more than a decoy. The true star plasma vessel is someone else entirely. And right now, the heretical cult known as the Star Religious Group, the cursed user organization known as Q, and even Jujutsu High itself, the very institution responsible for protecting the star plasma vessel, have all had their attention drawn to this decoy. Oh wait, I forgot, there is no more Q. Naturally, whether she's a decoy or not is beside the point. Our target is not the star plasma vessel, it's the restricted vault at Jujutsu High, located beneath the Cozy Eye Palace. Here Naoya paused, then continued, do you understand now? Not only must we not harm her, we need to make sure she stays safe. Right up until she arrives at the Cozy Eye Palace in one piece. That's what casting a stone to test the waters means. She is the stone that clears our path to the target. How do you know Master Tengen made separate arrangements? Kamo Kunishiro asked, suspicious, and received only a deliberately vague reply. I have my sources. There were clearly still plenty of unanswered questions. But they had come this far, and Kunishiro believed she was not the sort of person who could be so easily manipulated. Fine, as long as we can get the 9 phases back, I'll trust you once. What do we do now? Go protect this decoy of yours? I can head over. She had already steeled herself to act for the sake of her clan. But the girl before her rejected the idea with quiet, unhurried certainty. Until the star plasma vessel reaches the Cozy Eye Palace at Jujutsu High, there is nothing to be done. The only thing that matters, the one thing you absolutely must not do, is let yourself be seen. In fact, don't even get close. Because the 6 eyes are protecting the star plasma vessel right now. Here, Walnut-chan new history, Samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifus we have set new community milestones, 100 power stones equals +1 bonus chapter for all readers. Chapter 56, Night Raid, bonus chapter, 1868 words. So your plan is just to sit here and watch. Do nothing else. Wait until those 2 Jujutsu High escorts handle everything themselves. But that star plasma vessel is surrounded by a whole pack of sorcerers right now. What if she gets killed before we even get our chance to act? Or are you telling me you have some other arrangement you're not sharing? Why do you ask so many questions? We're supposed to be working together. If you won't tell me anything, how am I supposed to trust you? The bottom line is this, the chance to steal the 9 phases is something I promised to the Kamo clan. All you need to do is follow my lead. Don't ask questions. Don't cause trouble. Naoya irritably dug a finger in her ear and smiled coldly. What's the matter? Afraid I'll play you for fools? Kamo Norineo narrowed her eyes, staring hard at the girl in front of her. Naoya was sunk deep into the soft cushions of the hotel sofa, her fingertips never once stopping, endlessly refreshing the screen of her phone, not even bothering to spare her a proper glance. Carrying yourself like that is the same as handing over every bit of initiative to someone else. You're certainly eager, and what exactly has that eagerness gotten you? Naoya finally looked up, eyes landing on Kamo Norineo. Take today. You went to all that trouble sneaking out to surveil the star plasma vessel, and nearly blew your cover right in front of the Jujutsu High escorts, scrambling back with your tail between your legs like a stray dog, barely making it back here with your life. That's because they were using cursed spirit manipulation. Jabbed squarely in a sore spot in front of someone else, Kamo Norineo's face flushed crimson, and she shot back furiously. I specialize in close quarters combat. When he's sending cursed spirits at me from range, pinning me down completely, there's no way to get near him. Close quarters specialist. More like you were never born with a technique. Southwest brawling up close is your only option. Naoya let out a contemptuous snort, her expression making no effort to hide her disdain. After half a day in this woman's company, she had already sized her up completely. The person the Kamo clan had sent was, at her absolute ceiling, barely first-grade material. That level of ability might let you stand as a pillar in some minor, second-rate family. But in the eyes of the three great clans, it barely cleared the threshold of acceptable. Had the Kamo clan simply not believed the intelligence she'd given them, and sent this marginal figure as a result? Someone they could cut off cleanly if things went sideways, a disposable piece they could disavow without a second thought. Naoya didn't even need to think hard to see through the old geezer's calculations. What a bunch of hidebound fossils. She cursed them silently. The old men perched at the top of the jujitsu world were always like this, wanting everything, giving up nothing, forever hesitating and hedging, until in the end they wound up with nothing at all. Not that it mattered. As far as her plan was concerned, she hadn't needed anything from this person in the first place. And another thing. The vein at Kamo Norineo's temple throbbed visibly, and she forced the words out through clenched teeth. Weren't you the one who said to keep the star plasma vessel alive? I still managed to clear out several sorcerers who were lurking nearby, a Shikigami user, and another one who could make copies of himself. I drove them both off. Yes, fine, I know. Naoya waved a dismissive hand. What, are you asking for credit now? You don't seriously think that without you, those two Jujutsu High escorts couldn't have handled that rabble on their own? That's... The fight went out of Kamo Norineo all at once. Her shoulders slumped, and when she spoke again there was a deflation she couldn't quite disguise. You're right. Compared to those two Jujutsu High escorts, I'm not even close. As long as you understand. From the corner of her eye, Naoya caught the sight of Kamo Norineo storming out and slamming the door behind her. She didn't so much as lift an eyebrow, just dropped her gaze and refreshed the phone screen once more. The cold light of the display washed over her face, and reflected in her eyes was a countdown, the bounty on Amai Riko, ticking down. Was Zenin Toji, at this very moment, also staring at this bounty page, sharpening his blade for those 30 million. Amai Riko was the bait. According to how things were supposed to unfold, she would be killed by Toji. Yes, that was how it should go. She had spent an entire year maintaining a hollow, performative correspondence with her, and wasn't this exactly the opportunity she'd been working toward? Whether she was absorbed as the star plasma vessel, or killed as the bait meant to draw out Toji, either way, she was a sacrifice. That much was the same. Naoya felt a faint, restless unease stir in her chest. She switched over to the MSN notifications page, and found that Amai Riko still hadn't sent any new messages. How are? Her fingers tapped out the characters. She stared at the screen, hesitated, and in the end deleted what she'd typed, character by character, until nothing was left. The hotel room was booked through noon tomorrow. It was in the outskirts of Tokyo, less than half an hour's drive from Jujutsu High. The whole plan had been to lie in wait near Jujutsu High, so there was no reason to go chasing after the star plasma vessel wherever she wandered. But then, what does it mean that she's gone to Okinawa? In the dead of night, wide awake, Naoya refreshed the bounty site that sorcerers used, and one newly updated piece of intelligence drove itself straight into her eyes. Confirmed, target boarded a flight last night at 10 o'clock, bound for Okinawa. I had no idea there was any trip to Okinawa involved. Naoya was momentarily at a loss. Was this something that had happened in her previous life as well, or was it a deviation in this one? The only thing she had ever confirmed was the after-the-fact account that had leaked out. The star plasma vessel, used as bait, had been killed by Zenin Toji after entering Jujutsu High. That was all she knew. Jujutsu High was in Tokyo. Amai Riko was in Tokyo. So why on earth would she run all the way out to Okinawa? Did she think the earth was round enough that going all the way around would bring her back? Naoya ground her back teeth together, and a decision took shape in her mind. I'll just have to send the Kamo clan's person to Okinawa to keep an eye on things. Her mind made up, she rose immediately and pulled open her door. Kamo Norineo's room was right next to hers. Knock knock. Knock knock knock, her knuckles rapped against the door panel, the dull sound ringing out with unusual clarity in the silent corridor. Are you in there? I need to talk to you about something. She waited with forced patience for 2 or 3 seconds. From inside came the electronic beep of the lock disengaging, and then the door was pulled inward. Naoya looked up, and the first thing she saw was Kamo Norineo's silhouette. Her eyebrow arched immediately. You took forever, the words died in her throat. Something was wrong. The person standing in the doorway was indeed Kamo Norineo, but her face was white as paper, utterly without life, and a thin, deep line of red was blooming slowly from her neck. Flesh parting. A muffled, sickening sound. In the next instant, a long, narrow blade burst through from beneath Kamo Norineo's ribs with brutal force, so fast it tore the air, and before Naoya could call up even a thread of cursed energy, the ice-cold edge had already driven clean through her chest. What is this? Pain crashed over her entire body in an instant, her vision beginning to blur. The Kamo clan person, how did I not sense anything at all? She tried to fight back, but her body was completely drained, she couldn't even lift a finger. Had her heart been pierced? The long blade lodged in her body wrenched viciously at an angle, and with it, she and the already dead Kamo Norineo were both hauled into the pitch-black room. The blade was ripped free. Robbed of the only thing holding her up, Naoya crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, crashing hard onto the freezing floor. Through her blurring vision, the shape finally took form, the towering figure standing in the darkness. Of course. Completely impossible to guard against. A killer who left no trace in cursed energy, wasn't this exactly the kind of existence she had always known existed? Disheveled black hair hanging over his forehead. A distinctive scar curving at the corner of his mouth. And those eyes, always slightly drooping, always carrying that vague air of indifference. The moon reached up and scratched the back of his head, his tone utterly casual. Didn't expect there'd be escorts hiding on the side. I sent that pack of sorcerers to wear down Gojo Satoru, not to deal with small fry like you. Though honestly, pretty stupid of you. Not even the slightest guard up. Made it real easy for me to slip right into your den. TCH. Job's done. You've just gone and added to my workload for nothing. The moon rolled his shoulders and turned, walking toward the window. A sorcerer's body was far more resilient than an ordinary person's, but with the heart completely destroyed, unless one could reforge the flesh with the reverse curse technique, there was ultimately no coming back from it. The darkness closing in before her eyes was something she knew intimately, it was death. Naoya ground her teeth to powder and wrung out the very last thread of her strength, forcing the name through the gap between them. The man's footsteps stopped dead. He turned back slowly, and in those slightly drooping eyes, a flicker of amused surprise. You actually know who I am. He pulled the corner of his mouth into a grin. Though I go by Fushiguro now. Naoya opened her mouth, still trying to say something. In the next instant, a blade of cold steel drove through her skull without any warning. The world collapsed into perfect, silent darkness. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, samsara game, starting in the long dark with my waifu's help smash these goals. 100 power stones equals +1 bonus chapter, for everyone, chapter 57. The spring silkworm exhausts its silk only upon death. 1521 words. How are cursed spirits born? Generally speaking, the scattered negative emotions that humans generate in daily life, regret, shame, fear, jealousy, heartache, continuously leak cursed energy outward, accumulating in certain spaces over time until they coalesce into form, crystallizing into cursed spirits. That's not wrong, strictly speaking. But it is, in the end, nothing more than the most common and unimaginative of truisms, like how, when people think of fruit, their minds leap first and always to apples to pears. Does that mean all the other fruits in the world simply cease to exist? The birth of cursed spirits has always been like the fruits of this world, there has never been only one form. Beyond the direct gestation of negative emotion, there are hypothetical cursed spirits, born of humanity's reverence and terror toward myths, legends, and imagined monsters. There are conceptual cursed spirits, born of humanity's instinctive dread of natural phenomena, catastrophe, death. And beyond even those, there are those that come from human death itself. After being killed. After dying. After being cursed. The resentful soul, its lingering attachment to the living world, these, too, often give birth to cursed spirits. Sorcerers in particular. Because they carry cursed energy, the probability of their violent deaths producing powerful cursed spirits is 100-fold greater than that of ordinary people. And the simplest, most effective way to prevent this post-mortem curse transformation is to end someone's life completely with an attack imbued with cursed energy. Naoya Zenin, in her previous life, as a human, had died at her last breath precisely at the hands of Lady Oji, an ordinary person wielding nothing more than an ordinary weapon. That was why, after death, she had fallen into the curse and become a cursed spirit. But there was one thing that had always struck Naoya as deeply strange. By any normal logic, becoming a cursed spirit is not some second life. A cursed spirit born from a human death is a maddened, cursed soul, stripped of reason, stripped of wisdom, stripped of memory. Only the final obsession from life remains to drive it forward. It is nothing more than the ash left behind when the living flame burns itself out. And yet, when Naoya Zenin herself had become a cursed spirit, it had been nothing like that at all. Yes, her mind had been flooded with the will to take revenge, but her memories had remained largely intact. Her thinking had been strikingly clear. The elation of victory in battle, the searing pain when her body took damage, these sensations that confirmed the existence of a self were no different from when she had been alive. She had even had the leisure to crack a few jokes at her enemies mid-fight. She had even begun to wonder, deep down, whether that impulse toward vengeance had truly come from the curse of a cursed spirit, or whether it had simply been her own will all along. That's not right. Fundamentally not right. A cursed spirit shouldn't be like that at all. Wasn't the point that cursed energy surges, that you become a grotesque beast bereft of reason, that you haunt the living with venomous hatred until your dying wish is fulfilled, and only then does clarity return, the curse dissolving into nothing? Becoming a cursed spirit is just not supposed to work this way. And yet I'm the only one who managed to keep her sanity. Does that mean I'm a natural-born cursed spirit? That my talent for being a cursed spirit surpasses even my talent as a human? What a laugh. As that thought ran its course, Naoya realized her will had returned to her. She slowly opened her eyes. Zenin Toji was no ordinary man, but there was no question that not a shred of cursed energy existed within him. Whatever he had used to kill her just now was almost certainly a mundane metal weapon. Which meant, she hadn't expected to be reborn once already, and now to become a cursed spirit all over again. She had come here in the first place to obtain the records on the half-cursed spirit experiments, but that problem had now resolved itself neatly. After all, once she became a complete cursed spirit, there was no longer any need to agonize over whether she qualified as a half-cursed spirit. That said, why had Toji attacked this place? She had assumed he would keep his eyes fixed solely on the star plasma vessel. Naoya turned it over quietly in her mind, then recalled the last words she had heard before losing consciousness, and the answer came to her quickly. So that was it. The bounty on Amiriko had originally been posted online by Zenin Toji himself, bait to draw in pawns that would wear down Gojo Satoru. And Kamo Noritoshi's earlier skirmish with the bounty hunters had no doubt left a trail. That trail had led Toji here to her. Things being what they were, she would deal with Toji first, avenge herself, and worry about everything else afterward. If she waited any longer and let Gojo Satoru finish him off, there would be no one left to take her revenge on. Her gaze slowly sharpened into focus. Naoya steadied herself, drawing on instinct and experience to rouse her cursed spirit body into flight, and then, in the next instant, she noticed something was wrong. She perceived it with perfect clarity. Her hands, her feet, this flesh and blood shell that belonged to a human being, were completely immobile, slumped on the cold floor. From the wounds on her forehead and chest, a tearing agony was radiating outward along her nerves. She hadn't become a cursed spirit. Then how was she alive? With great effort she moved her pupils, glancing with her peripheral vision toward her own body, and went rigid. Dark violet tendrils, thick as twisted muscle fibers, coiling and grotesque, were pouring out of the fatal wounds on her forehead, and chest like maggots scrambling over one another, writhing as they sealed the injuries still seeping with blood. Naoya's eyes snapped hard to one side. The full-length mirror in the hotel room stood right there. But in the mirror's reflection, those hideous tendrils were nowhere to be seen. What looked back at her was only a wretched human silhouette, face drenched in blood, chest torn clean through. Mirrors cannot reflect cursed spirits. No, this isn't right. These dark violet tendrils, this is my own body structure from my previous life. The physical form I had as a cursed spirit. Too, her consciousness shuddered. Those dark violet strands, cursed spirit bodily tissue, threaded like muscle fiber, continued to pour endlessly from the wounds Toji had left behind, winding around her human shell layer by layer, like silkworms spinning themselves into a cocoon. And wherever that dark violet layer wrapped itself, the reflection in the mirror vanished entirely. No one in this world had more experience transforming into a cursed spirit than she did. When a human becomes a cursed spirit, they shed their original flesh completely. The spirit body is rebuilt from pure cursed energy. It absolutely should not look like this. A human body being wrapped up from the outside by cursed spirit limbs growing out of itself. Unless, was this what Gojo Satoru's note had called the nested overlap? An anomaly unlike anything she had ever seen. Unease churned in the depths of Naoya's heart, but her body was as if nailed to the floor, unable to summon even a thread of cursed energy. She had no choice but to wait, like meat on a cutting board, with nowhere else to go. Speaking of which, what time was it now? Outside the window, the sky was pitch black. How long would she have to wait here? Surely by the time she could move again, the battle on that end would have long since been decided. Beep beep beep. The phone that had rolled into a gap in the floorboards suddenly lit up, its crisp notification chime cutting sharply through the dead silence of the room. She rolled her barely movable eyes toward it. On the screen, a message from Amiriko had appeared. Zenin Kohai, how are you doing today? You know where I went today? I went to Okinawa. I went to the beach with a new friend I made, we even went boating. Kurwa was there too. Today was so much fun. Probably the happiest day of my entire life. We're about to catch our flight back to Tokyo. Naoya's pupils contracted slightly. Then she watched as the phone screen, with no one to answer it, went dark. Walnut-chan for more chapters. New history, Jujutsu X Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Help us reach these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 Universal Bonus Chapter 58. Cursed Womb reappears 1511 words Toji, what the hell were you just doing? I've been trying to reach you this whole time. On the other end of the line, that familiar Korean accent came through, the kind that killed the mood the moment it opened its mouth. Toji Fushiguro furrowed his brow. Didn't I tell you? I went and dealt with those two lackeys. Slept it off after. The 6 eyes is tomorrow. You really want me going into that half asleep? I'm asking how you disposed of the bodies. How else? Killed them and left them where they fell. Toji Fushiguro yawned and swung his legs off the bed, bare feet landing on the cold floor. Before the job, he'd scrubbed every trace clean, avoided every camera, every blind spot, and afterward checked into an unremarkable little hotel nearby, planning to sleep undisturbed until morning. Wherever you are, the location I sent you earlier, get there now. The broker on the other end kept pushing. Toji reached up and raked a hand through his hair, mildly irritated. Look, we've worked together plenty, but don't you think you're overstepping a little? He wandered to the window and yanked the curtains open and stopped dead. I already know what you want me to see. You're nearby. You can see it too. Toji Fushiguro licked his lips. From here, he could make out the small hotel he'd visited just a few hours ago. Above the otherwise unremarkable 3-story building, hanging in the black of the night sky, floated a massive, translucent sphere, like a bloated amniotic sac, swollen and suspended in the air. Turbid, viscous cursed energy churned and roiled within its membrane walls, and from the bottom of the sac, a thick, bluish-purple umbilical cord of flesh dangled downward, plunging straight through a window somewhere below. That's a cursed womb, isn't it? That's exactly why I asked if you dealt with the bodies. Kong Shiyu shouted. As a black market broker operating in the gray zones of the jujitsu world, Kong Shiyu had no technique, and couldn't use proper cursed sorcery, but he'd been born with a faint trace of cursed energy, just enough to let him perceive the forms of cursed spirits and follow the clash of sorcerers in battle. Toji Fushiguro was a different matter entirely. The absolute heavenly restriction had forged him a body without peer in this world, and had, in exchange, drained every last trace of cursed energy from within him. By rights, he shouldn't have been able to see so much as a cursed spirit's shadow. And yet this very body, the one the jujitsu world had cast aside, could trace the flowing outline of cursed energy itself, through senses honed to an almost inhuman edge. What rotten luck! Went and became a cursed spirit, did she? Toji stared at the cursed womb hanging in the night sky, and scratched the back of his head. Why didn't you use a cursed tool? Kong Shiyu demanded. You're asking that now? Because I had ugly treasure stashed in my stomach, couldn't be bothered pulling out a cursed tool just for 2 grunts. Toji's eyes slowly narrowed. Besides, even when a sorcerer gets killed, turning into a cursed spirit is still a long shot. Who could have seen this coming? Less talk. You can see it too, right? I'm telling you, get out of there, now. Once the sorcerers show up and find you, things are going to get complicated. Yeah, I hear you. Quit your yelling. Toji clicked his tongue, turned, and bent down to slip on the canvas shoes sitting beside the bed, but the moment his fingertips grazed the heel, his hand froze. Can't do that. What do you mean? What are you planning? Kong Shiyu's voice sharpened instantly. But Toji was already done listening. He shoved his index and middle fingers deep down his own throat. His Adam's apple lurched violently. With a strained, suppressed retch, wet with stomach acid and clear saliva, he vomited up a fist-sized lump of dark reddish-purple flesh. The moment it hit the floor, the lump shot outward and expanded, swollen, bruised loops of something resembling a bloated, purplish intestine, coiling up around Toji's lean frame, until the fat, grotesque human face at its far end worked its way around from the back of his neck to settle before his shoulder. Toji raised a hand. The face immediately opened its mouth and spat a large blade into his waiting palm, a dao with a handguard trailing pure white tassels, delivered steady and sure. Grade 3 Cursed Spirit, Ugly Treasure. Its own combat ability was negligible, but it possessed an exceptionally rare extra-dimensional storage capability. The interior of its body was a vast pocket dimension. Toji had captured and tamed it to serve as a mobile armory. What are you doing? Just leave. Subduing cursed spirits is not our job. Kong Shiyu couldn't see what was happening on this end, but seemed to sense something regardless, and called out a warning. No, you don't understand. Toji gave a cold laugh and shoved the window open. Cursed spirits born from a murder will naturally form a vengeance-binding vow. If I let it take shape, it'll latch onto me like a grudge-bearing ghost and never let go. Any other time, I wouldn't care. But I'm fighting the 6 eyes tomorrow. I can't leave loose ends. I'm hanging up. The words were barely out of his mouth before his legs exploded off the windowsill. He shot out into the air like an arrow loosed from a bow. The body gifted to him by the heavenly restriction moved between the densely packed buildings as though the rooftops were level ground, a few vaulting leaps, a matter of seconds, and he landed on the roof of the hotel where the cursed womb had taken shape. He'd been here just hours ago. Toji navigated it easily, slipping in through a window and dropping into the room, where he found the fleshy umbilical cord hanging from outside, firmly anchored to the still warm corpse on the floor. A sharp, clean crack. The blade swept through. The stubborn, flesh and sinew cord was severed in a single stroke. Deprived of its cursed energy supply, the unfinished cursed womb let out a piercing shriek, its membrane visibly caving in before his eyes, and within moments dissolved silently into the night breeze. So it was the older one who turned. Toji cast a downward glance at the body on the floor, flicked his wrist, and brought the blade down again, driving it clean through the corpse's chest. That sealed it. No chance of becoming a cursed spirit now. With that handled, he stepped toward the other body slumped in the corner. The other one died ugly. Toji raised the blade high, ready to deliver the final strike to this corpse as well, no loose ends. But just as the edge was about to fall, his arm stopped dead. How did I miss this earlier? Was I too tired? He hesitated for a moment, then slowly crouched down and reached toward the girl's body, feeling along the sleeve, and pulled out a short blade, a wakizashi, elegantly fitted. A flick of his thumb eased 3 inches of steel from the sheath. His gaze locked onto the mirror-smooth surface of the blade. No way. Smiling Aoba. Isn't this a cursed tool from the Zenin estate? The body granted by the heavenly restriction meant he could only be harmed by cursed spirits through cursed tools. No one knew the arsenal locked away in the Zenin estate's vaults better than he did. No wonder she knew my name. She's one of the Zenin kids. That explains it. Toji murmured quietly to himself, eyes untroubled. To him, the clan that had produced him was nothing more than a rotting pit of a swamp. He weighed the wakizashi in his hand a moment, then casually fed it into Ugly Treasure's open mouth. Came out ahead, even got some spoils. I always said I had a knack for windfall. As for this kid's body. Toji dropped his gaze to the girl on the floor once more, and let go of the idea of finishing her off. He addressed the cursed spirit on his shoulder, Ugly Treasure, swallow her. I'll ask Naobito, that old man, whether he's willing to pay to get her back. See what he's worth. The ugly cursed spirit let out a cry like a whale, then wrenched its jaws open to their absolute widest, its limp body spreading forward, and swallowed the girl on the floor whole. Walnut-chan in P for more. New history, Jujutsu x Miyaruko, oh no, am I a villain too? Help us unlock these community rewards, 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 59, yo, long time no see. 2847 words. What was it, truly, that divided the world of Jujutsu from the world of ordinary man? Fushiguro Toji sometimes turned that question over in his mind. There were countless ways to draw the line, cursed techniques, cursed energy, bloodline. But the most fundamental admission ticket, he thought, had to be this, whether or not you could see. Ordinary humans could not perceive cursed spirits or jujutsu, not with the naked eye, not through cameras or any other indirect means. That was the decisive difference. If you couldn't see it, you couldn't acknowledge its existence. Even if you were being killed by it, you would die without ever understanding why. And so sorcerers had always prided themselves on that most basic of gifts, the ability to see. Ordinary people were deceived by their own eyes, but sorcerers, armed with cursed energy, came closer to the true nature of the world. A pack of idiots. So busy clutching their cursed energy that they've gone and let it blind the eyes that were supposed to be seeing in the first place. Fushiguro Toji cast his gaze down at the two sets of footprints pressed into the dust along the floor, one large, one small, one ahead of the other, and let a quiet snort of contempt slip from his throat. Did they really think erasing their residue would keep them from being followed? Hands in his pockets, unhurried, he moved through the long corridor at his own pace. That was right, setting aside the brief interlude involving the cursed womb, everything had, until this moment, gone according to plan. That 48-hour bounty had been, from the very beginning, nothing more than a feint, bait to paralyze the Six-Eyes brat from the Gojo family. And sure enough, after escorting the star plasma vessel all the way to Jujutsu High, the kid had finally dropped the limitless he'd been maintaining the entire time. 48 hours on escort duty, he probably hadn't dared release the technique for even a single second. His body would have been pushed to its absolute limit. Judgment, reaction time, perception, all of it would have been running at a fraction of its usual capacity. Of course, even weakened to that extent, without that special-grade curse tool, inverted spear of heaven, that killing instrument shaped like a jit, capable of forcibly nullifying any active technique, killing a Six-Eyes sorcerer would have been a flat impossibility. From here, he only had to follow the footprints of the cursed spirit manipulation user, and the star plasma vessel to find the Tomb Star Palace, where the vessel would ultimately be delivered to complete her merger with Master Tengen. Fushiguro Toji raised his eyes. The corridor had reached its end. Since the day I was born, everyone said I was special, different from everyone else. But I just want to be with everyone a little longer. I want to go to all kinds of places with everyone and see all kinds of things. Beyond the corridor lay the outer grounds of the Tomb Star Palace. Ancient tiered halls clustered in layers around the colossal underground tree that rose from the earth at the center. A girl's tear-choked cries drifted over on the wind. Toji scratched the back of his neck. What's all that babbling about? Time to wrap this up. He reached into his pocket. His fingertips found the cold block of iron. This was no cursed tool, so there was no need to store it inside Ugly Baby and hide it in his stomach. He flicked off the safety with one hand and drew the pistol. He raised his arm, took aim, locked all 3 points of alignment on the girl's skull, and squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, blood bloomed, the star plasma vessel was confirmed dead. All right, good work everyone. That's a wrap. Fushiguro Toji tucked the pistol back into his pocket. At that same moment, the Jujutsu High escort with the strange bangs spoke in a cold, cutting voice. Why are you here? Looked like it was a little too early to call it done. He'd have to deal with the cursed spirit manipulation user while he was at it. Fushiguro Toji let out a sigh, and the corner of his mouth curved upward. I killed Gojo Satoru. Is that so? The cursed spirit manipulation user was nothing to worry about. The only real concern was whether, after killing him, all the cursed spirits bound inside him would come flooding out at once. These people, born into families blessed with cursed energy, taking their gift for granted, were always so full of themselves. Did he really think he could get that close to me? That he could capture the ugly baby off my shoulder before my blade reached him? A blessing. Speaking of blessings, Fushiguro Toji located the star plasma vessel's body, and used Ugly Baby to swallow it whole. A corpse was just dead meat, yes, but to collect the final payment, he'd have to show the client the goods. By now the campus of Jujutsu High was crawling with the fly heads he'd released. Those small cursed spirits would keep them scrambling for a good while. No one would have a moment to spare for this side. Kong Shiyu's arranged vehicle should be waiting outside the mountain. Time to just walk out and leave. The remains of star plasma vessel Amai Riko. The moment he stepped off the Jujutsu High grounds, Kong Shiyu was waiting outside and drove him straight toward the Ponching cult's headquarters. By the time they arrived at that vast, all-white hall of luxury, the horizon was already soaked in the orange of dusk. The man in white robes standing before him was probably some kind of high priest, the cult leader type. This appeared to be a religion that worshipped Master Tengen as a divine being, and it was he who had paid the enormous sum for the star plasma vessel's life. Fushiguro Toji directed Ugly Baby to open its mouth, expecting it to disgorge Amai Riko's body. He waited 2 seconds. Nothing happened. The body, where is it? Kong Shiyu, assuming Toji had simply spaced out, prompted him. I'm wondering the same thing. Fushiguro Toji stared blankly for a moment, then knocked on Ugly Baby's slick, sticky head. It seems like it can't spit Amai Riko's body back out. Kong Shiyu's voice tightened. If there's no body, we can't collect the final payment. Earlier, Fushiguro Toji narrowed his eyes, thinking it through carefully. If I had to say, there was a cursed spirit manipulation user who tried to capture it during our fight. I interrupted him before he finished, but it's possible he managed to do something to it in the meantime. Could have affected its functionality. I don't care about any of that. The white-robed cult leader suddenly burst into a hysterical shriek. All I care about is whether I can get what I want. Or is this all just a scheme to cheat me? Fushiguro Toji suppressed the urge to split the old fool in front of him clean in two. When it came to clients who held the money, he could always manage 1 or 2 extra grains of patience. He raised his voice, injecting a note of perfunctory reassurance into his tone. I do have some professional standards. The body is genuinely in there, there's just been a small complication. I'll figure out how to fix it. You'd better do it fast. Otherwise don't even think about seeing a single coin. The cult leader snapped the words out in fury, spun on his heel, and disappeared through a small side door into the inner sanctum. Fushiguro Toji and Kong Shiyu exchanged a glance, and both shrugged at the same moment. What are you planning to do? If all else fails, I'll just have to go back and pay that cursed spirit manipulation sorcerer another visit. Not sure if killing him will fix it, but it's worth a try. Then I'll be waiting for good news. I'm off then. Did my luck just run out? How can there be this many problems? Stop complaining. The job isn't finished yet. He waved farewell to Kong Shiyu, shoved his hands into his trouser pockets, and turned to leave the punching cult's extravagantly appointed all-white headquarters. What a waste. Compared to the money they must have poured into building this place, the commission I was paid probably doesn't even cover the rounding error. No wonder everyone's clawing over each other to found a cult and set themselves up as a messiah. So this is what it tastes like. His gaze drifted idly over the rows of pristine white walls lining the road on both sides, his mind wandering through inconsequential thoughts. Come to think of it, what's the point of lining up all these white walls right at the entrance to the compound? Is this just how religious architecture works? The sun's a bit blinding. The air all around him was filled with the overlapping chorus of cicadas and crickets, and yet it was wrapped in a layer of silence so dense it felt suffocating. He raised a hand to shade his eyes from the glare, squinting toward the end of the road ahead, where, silhouetted against the molten gold of the setting sun, a white-haired figure stood blocking his path, head hanging low. Well, well. Long time no see. You're kidding me. Fushiguro Toji's pupils contracted sharply. The 6 eyes of the Gojo family, he had driven a blade through the man's skull. Why was he standing here now? Dead serious. I'm very much alive and kicking. Gojo Satoru's face was still streaked with dried blood, and his expression was one of near-manic exhilaration. In the next instant, Fushiguro Toji, born into the illustrious Zenin clan, arrived at the answer immediately. Reverse curse technique. Gojo Satoru bellowed, like a teacher praising a student. He looked up, and the sight that greeted him, a man who had nearly been killed, now standing before the person who had nearly killed him, should by any right have been one of grudge and vengeance. And yet Gojo Satoru's face held nothing but the manic, radiant elation of a man who had brushed against death and, in that moment, touched something entirely new. He was even waving his arms around as he launched into an enthusiastic account of how he had achieved his grasp of the reverse curse technique in that knife edge between life and death. Fushiguro Toji said nothing, but understood it perfectly. This guy had completely lost himself to the high. But in the moment I nearly died, I grasped the very core of cursed energy. Your failure came from not severing my head, and from not using the curse tool when you stabbed through it. At last, the long exposition concluded, and Gojo Satoru's voice rose sharply as he delivered his final verdict on the outcome of the fight. The fight hasn't even started yet. Fushiguro Toji pulled the corner of his mouth. That was right, it wasn't a problem, not at all. Even if Gojo had mastered the reverse curse technique, the inverted spear of heaven could still pierce through his limitless. Toji fixed his gaze on Gojo Satoru's silhouette and reached up toward his shoulder, and found nothing there. The brain that had been running hot on adrenaline went instantly cold, as though doused with ice water. Right now, he had no cursed tools. The correct choice was to retreat immediately. Is that right? Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Gojo Satoru was still flailing around on the spot in his half-deranged euphoria, not sparing Toji so much as a second glance. In that brief window, Fushiguro Toji pushed off with the balls of his feet, and shot sideways like an arrow loosed from a bow. The rows of high walls the punching cult had erected along the road, their purpose had been a mystery until now, became his best cover in an instant. But the moment his figure slipped behind the wall, a searing red light exploded. Curse technique reversal, red. The crimson orb, that embodiment of repulsive force, screamed past his shoulder, and the entire row of white walls was obliterated in an instant. The shockwave hurled Fushiguro Toji bodily through the air, and he slammed into the rubble of shattered stone and dust. By some mercy, the body that had been honed to its absolute limit by heaven, curse, and binding vow proved resilient enough, not a single bone had broken. Wait, ugly baby carried cursed energy. He realized it in the same instant. He had to swallow it back into his stomach and suppress its cursed energy signature, otherwise even a trace of its aura would allow those 6 eyes to pinpoint his location with perfect precision. As long as ugly baby was stored away, his constitution, 0 cursed energy, body bound by a binding vow, would render him invisible even to the 6 eyes. Not a trace of him would be found. Ugly baby responded to his will in an instant. The body that had been coiled around him rapidly contracted, condensing into a single purple-red sphere of flesh. Fushiguro Toji opened his mouth and swallowed it whole. Pull back. He had always been an assassin who danced on knife edges, not a warrior who fought to the death. Running had never been anything to be ashamed of. His silhouette dissolved into a blur that the naked eye could barely track, weaving through the shattered ruins and broken walls that Gojo Satoru had blasted apart. You're running. I'm absolutely flying right now. Come on, weren't you so impressive just a minute ago? Don't disappoint me. Gojo Satoru drifted slowly upward into the sky, his blue eyes gazing down at the earth like a god surveying the mortal world. Come on, don't be scared. Come play. Who in their right mind would play with you right now? Just make it into the trees up ahead. Fushiguro Toji's feet came to a dead stop. A gut-wrenching, soul-splitting agony detonated without warning from somewhere deep in his stomach. He slowly lowered his gaze. His pupils took in a sight that should have been impossible. A short blade, gleaming with cold light, had been driven upward from inside his own abdominal cavity, punching clean through the tough flesh and muscle, its tip bursting out through his body. The blade was clear as a mirror, not a drop of blood on it, yet it reflected his own face back at him with perfect clarity, an expression written entirely in disbelief. In that moment, fragmented shards of memory came crashing into his blank mind without warning. The day Megumi was born, in the maternity ward, a doctor pushed up his glasses and asked, with the routine formality of someone who had said it 1,000 times, "Will you be opting for a natural birth or a cesarean section?" Natural birth has a faster recovery and less trauma, but it demands a great deal from the mother's willpower. He hadn't bothered weighing in, he'd left the decision to the mother. In the end, they had chosen cesarean. It hurt this much. Crack, the crisp sound was flesh and sinew being forcibly sliced apart. The sharp blade swept sideways, carving a gash through his body, a body tempered by heaven and binding vow to a hardness exceeding steel, with great and labored effort. Then a slender, pale hand, gripping the hilt, emerged through the blood-soaked wound. After it came a second hand, fingertips hooking the edges of the opening for leverage. From inside ugly baby, the inside is easier to break through than the outside. Fushiguro Toji's consciousness had been shredded to pieces by the agony. Only that single fragment of thought remained. He could not have imagined, no matter how hard he tried, that anyone could have pulled off something like this. And then, the face he recognized, belonging to a girl from the Zenin family, hair matted with dripping blood, began to squeeze itself out of his split-open abdominal cavity, little by little. Well, well. Long time no see. Naoya hauled Amiriko along with one hand while pulling herself free from inside the grotesquely hideous cursed spirit, and gulped down great lungfuls of fresh air. Walnut-chan, winky face. New history, Jujutsu x Miruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Help smash these goals. 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter, for everyone, Chapter 60, Fan Meeting, bonus chapter. 1450 words. Fushiguro Toji finally dragged himself back to awareness from the depths of that relentless agony, unable to tell any more whether what he felt was pain or fury, and his entire face had twisted into something no longer quite human. He was spitting blood with every breath. His organs must have been shattered. Deep inside his ruined stomach, Chiho was still convulsing, still retching, expelling the intruder in fits and starts. And yet, even with his viscera in pieces, the strength flooded back into his limbs in a single instant. A bestial snarl tore from his throat, and his blade hand, trailing a shriek of displaced air, came crashing down toward the little Zenin brat in front of him. Naoya didn't flinch. She simply dragged Amiriko, limp and motionless, out of Chiho's maw first, tossed her aside onto the ground, and kept the knife in her other hand pressed steady against Toji's flank. The descending blade hand froze in place. Naoya seized the moment and wrenched herself free entirely. How's that? That move of mine. Cough, cough, cough. The freezing technique released a second later, all at once. Fushiguro Toji staggered backward several steps, his back slamming hard into the rubble before he barely managed to steady himself. Whatever last scrap of strength had been keeping him upright, enough for one more counterattack, scattered away with those ragged, violent coughs. His unfocused gaze drifted upward and collided with a pair of cerulean eyes high in the sky. Gojo Satoru was suspended beneath the clear morning light, eyes downcast, watching the wretched conclusion of the scene below with total indifference. How did you do it? He lowered his head. You're asking me how I did it. Naoya shook the blood and flesh from her hair, looked up at Toji. Because the inside of that cursed spirit is a kind of simplified domain, its own contained space. So the moment I deployed a domain to push back against it, it worked like indigestion. The thing just automatically vomited up whatever was inside. She wasn't wrong. Fushiguro Toji lowered his eyes. Chiho's lower half was still jutting out from his torn abdominal cavity, convulsing ceaselessly, retching without stop, and all the cursed tools and weapons he'd hidden inside over the years were dropping to the ground, one after another. Ain no Naboko struck the earth near his feet with a clang. His fingers twitched slightly. In the end, he let them fall back. He didn't reach for it. He only squeezed the last breath from his lungs and spoke, his voice reduced to a rasp. That technique just now, are you from the Naobito line? That's right, Toji-kun, and I'm actually a fan of yours, which means this is basically a fan meet and greet. Do you get it? I'm so thrilled right now I can barely stand it. You were clearly dead a moment ago. Was that the reverse curse technique? The reverse curse technique? No, it wasn't. But if you really had to describe it, it's something close enough. Naoya tapped the hilt of her knife against her chin, tilted her head, a feverish flush creeping across her face. How do I explain this to you? It wasn't the reverse curse technique, strictly speaking. But it did, in fact, generate positive energy. Earlier, when you killed me, I came this close to turning into a cursed spirit for good, you know. The kind you don't come back from. Nonsense. The one who turned into a cursed spirit was someone else entirely. Toji blinked, then denied it flatly. No, I turned too. As for the one from the Kamo family, the reason they turned into a cursed spirit was probably because they got caught in the overflow of cursed energy leaking from me. Collateral damage. Naoya cleared her throat and continued. The reverse cursed technique, the orthodox explanation, is that you multiply two negative cursed energies together, and since a negative times a negative gives a positive, that catalyzes a positive healing energy. But I've never been able to make sense of it. What does two separate quantities of cursed energy even mean? Isn't there only ever one? It's like water flowing through the same lake. Can you really tell which water came from where? Even if you forcibly divide it with some container, the moment it mixes back together, you can't tell them apart anymore. The way people describe the reverse curse technique has always struck me as utterly absurd, like claiming you can take two portions of 50-degree water, mix them together, and somehow end up with a cup of boiling water at 100 degrees. Enough babbling. What are you trying to say? Fushiguro Toji said under his breath. It's all thanks to you, Toji-kun. All at once, Naoya snapped her right hand up, like a child showing off a brand new toy, and there it was, a soft, pearlescent positive energy seeping in pale threads from her fingertips. By all normal logic, a person can only possess one reserve of cursed energy. But thanks to you, I found my second. There's no need for any arcane reverse curse technique that no one really understands. Two quantities of cursed energy, same source, different nature, you simply try to fuse them, and positive energy comes pouring out with ease. Not only did it heal me completely, it suppressed the cursed spirit transformation happening in my body. The only downside is that while the yield is absolutely staggering, the energy generation itself is violent, like setting off an annihilation reaction inside your own body. I barely pieced myself back together before the pain knocked me unconscious. You noticed, didn't you? I'm talking a lot today. It's because the pain is unbearable, even now, still going. I have to keep talking to take my mind off it. Whatever unorthodox method you used. Fushiguro Toji's peripheral vision drifted to Amai Riko, lying on the ground nearby, eyes shut, her chest rising and falling in faint, shallow movements. You kept the star plasma vessel alive. Is that right? Did I save her? I think so. My yield is massive, after all. Anyway, the next time I woke up from the pain, she was lying right there next to me. I should have charged straight out to kill you, but I thought it over and decided saving Amai was more important. At that, Naoya's voice dropped unexpectedly. Her gaze moved to Amai Riko beside her, settling on the blood matted into her hairline. I'll admit it, you struck her in the head. The brain is complicated. I genuinely don't know whether she made it or not. But she snapped her eyes back to Fushiguro Toji, lifting the white radiance in her hand. Want to give it a try, Toji-kun? Your brain is completely intact. I'm 100% certain I can bring you back. The corner of Fushiguro Toji's mouth pulled into a thin, strained smile. Come on, are you angry? Naoya walked slowly toward him, her voice carrying a note of sudden, bright understanding. I get it now. Thinking back, ambushing you from inside a cursed spirit's stomach was a bit underhanded, wasn't it? If you're not satisfied, I'll heal you right now and we start over this time. I'll kill you fair and square. But the moment those words left her mouth, the soft pearlescent glow at her fingertips guttered out, like a candle in the wind. Out of cursed energy. The girl stared at her palm for a moment, blinking. Forcing positive energy out of herself in that violent way twice in a row, and then straining to keep Amai Riko's last breath tethered, her cursed energy had long since run dry. With the final seconds of his life counting down, Fushiguro Toji let out a quiet sigh. He hadn't wanted his last sight to be this annoying little brat from the Zenin estate, but when his fading gaze drifted upward, there again was that white-haired, blue-eyed figure floating in the high sky. There was nowhere worth looking. He closed his eyes, exhausted, and spoke his final words, so it comes to this, and the Zenin estate still has to humiliate me, even at the end. Megumi, do with him as you will. Walnut-chan New History, Jujutsu x Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 61. A single fallen leaf. 1782 words. I had a dream. She had dreamed of herself sinking, endlessly, down and down. Kurwa, my friends from school, Gojo and Geto, they were all up above, calling out to me with everything they had. I kept trying to swim up, but I couldn't control my body. All of a sudden, you appeared, Zenin Kohai. I dreamed that you were pulling at me desperately, pulling and pulling me upward, over and over, no matter what anyone said. Someone who just woke up shouldn't be talking so much. Naoya looked down at Amai Riko. Her black hair, the ribbon that had held it back long since snapped, lay scattered across Naoya's lap. Could this be Zenin Kohai's lap pillow? Amai's brow arched, little by little. What are you talking about? What's wrong with it? Naoya asked, mildly puzzled. It was a posture she had taught herself without any instruction, from all the times she'd coaxed Maki and Mai to sleep. It did seem to help them rest more comfortably, though she'd never thought anything of it. Riko said nothing more. She simply rolled over and buried her face against Naoya's warm stomach. Naoya frowned, baffled. Steps approached from ahead. Naoya raised her eyes and saw two figures walking toward them from the direction of the coiling Star Sex headquarters. Riko, thank goodness, you. Sugura Geto had spotted the two of them sitting on the ground from a distance, and even before he'd finished speaking he was already breaking into a run. Gojo Satoru followed behind with both hands stuffed in his uniform pockets, unhurried as ever. A moment ago, seeing things here were settled, he had charged into the coiling Star Sex headquarters, intending to seize whoever among the Jujutsu world had been stirring up trouble from the shadows. Someone who knew the secrets of the Star Plasma Vessel and Master Tengen in such intimate detail, and who had been able to hire a killer like Toji Fushiguro, that was no ordinary person. And yet, somehow, when he came back, he'd brought Sugura Geto along with him. Geto ran up and stopped before Riko, his face still marked by the lingering shock of what had passed. He was gasping for breath, his gaze moving back and forth between Naoya and Riko, before he let out a small, relieved exhale, and then his eyes swept to the gutted corpse standing upright nearby, motionless, and his pupils shrank sharply. I'll set aside the question of why you're here. In any case, Gojo tells me it was you who saved Riko. He spoke. And what are you here for now? Naoya said with a cold laugh. I'd like to ask the same, why are you here? Sugura Geto opened his mouth, and in the end bowed his head. You're right, it's on me. It's all because I failed to notice that wretched monkey. Riko pushed herself upright with a hand on Naoya's shoulder, glanced at Sugura Geto, and shook her head. Don't say that. You didn't do anything wrong, Geto. Sugura Geto drew a long breath, as though he wanted to say something, then turned away, and raised his hand to cover his eyes. Crying, are we? Naoya said coldly. Who's crying? More importantly, since you're fine, Riko, let's go home. Amai Riko gave a soft sound of assent, but her gaze drifted slowly across the devastation surrounding them, as though searching for something. Then, abruptly, she spoke, come to think of it, Geto. Where's Kurwa? Sugura Geto's entire body went rigid. Only then did it hit him, the cruel, thoughtless mistake he had just made. If home was wherever the people who mattered to you were, then even if Riko had managed to survive by sheer luck, the only home she'd ever had been utterly destroyed in the course of this hunt. Amai I. Kurwa, she. Sugura Geto stumbled over every word, unable to say anything at all. Riko watched his expression. She stared for a moment and then, as though something had dawned on her, she spoke. Geto Kurwa is at Jujutsu High, isn't she? Then could you take me there? Geto hesitated and lifted his gaze to Gojo Satoru, who had come to stand beside him. Even knowing it was ill-timed, he found himself desperately hoping that his closest friend, always so quick with a quip, would say something like he always did, anything to break open the suffocating silence. But that hope, too, came to nothing. Are you certain, Riko? Gojo Satoru spoke quietly, no trace of humor in his voice, his blue eyes steady through his sunglasses, watching the girl in front of him. Riko nodded firmly, without a moment's hesitation. Naoya felt briefly lost, uncertain where she was supposed to go. This entire venture had been her own unilateral decision. She had slipped away from the Zenin estate alone, leaving only a hurried word with the maid who looked after Maki and Mai's daily needs, without breathing a word of her whereabouts to anyone else. So had the plan ended in total failure. The original goal had been to join forces with the Kamo family, to steal Kamo Noritoshi's research materials, and the 9 phases of the Cursed Womb. But the plan hadn't even properly begun before Toji Fushiguro, an unreasonable, impossible variable, had thrown everything into chaos. And that man was already dead at her own hands. She hadn't even had time to confirm anything from him before it was all over, abruptly and without ceremony. So then go back to the Zenin estate, just like that. The thought had barely surfaced before it was interrupted by a trembling against her arm. Naoya glanced sideways at Riko, who was clinging tightly to her elbow with one hand pressed softly to her own chest. The closer they drew to Jujutsu High's great vermilion torii gate at the entrance, the harder the girl's grip shook. Come to think of it, why had she come along to Jujutsu High at all? Naoya inwardly clicked her tongue. Probably some kind of acute stress response, she supposed. The girl had been clutching her arm ever since she woke up and refused to let go, and so Naoya had been dragged all this way by sheer force, practically used as a walking crutch. Still, considering she had gone to all that trouble to save her herself, it would be a waste of her own effort if something else went wrong now. And so Naoya bore it, for the time being. By the time they arrived at Jujutsu High, the sky had gone completely dark. The journey was silent the whole way. Gojo and Geto led them, and they came at last to an unremarkable room tucked into a corner of the school. An elevator. Naoya looked up. It was the old-fashioned kind that appeared in films from the end of the 19th, or the beginning of the 20th century, a wrought iron sliding door cage elevator. Its actual construction date, she suspected, was not far off from how it looked. Gojo Satoru and Suguru Geto exchanged a glance, then pulled open the heavy sliding doors. The 4 of them stepped inside in silence. The cage groaned and began its slow descent. Underground. So that's where it is, the Tomb Star Palace. The thought settled quietly in Naoya's mind. A faint sense of weightlessness continued for 5 or 6 minutes, until the elevator doors finally slid apart on either side, and a damp, cold air rushed over them. At that moment, the hand that had been gripping her arm so tightly, Riko's hand, finally let go. The girl seemed to lose all strength at once. She stumbled forward into the vast underground chamber, and then fell, hard, to her knees on the cold stone floor. Right where she and Kurwa had said their last goodbye. The woman who had been at her side for over a decade, familiar as family, she lay on the ground now in a twisted, contorted posture, her body long since cold, utterly still. Riko did not cry. She did not call out. She only slowly reached out her hand, fingertips brushing gently against Kurwa's cold cheek, as lightly as though she were afraid of disturbing her sleep. The dead cannot come back. Suguru Geto stood rooted in place, helpless. He knew how hollow his words were. He knew that no comfort at all, not a single word, could fill the void that had caved open inside the girl. But Riko suddenly raised her head, and looked at the 3 of them standing behind her, her eyes holding a calm unlike anything she had shown before. Gojo, Geto, take me to see Master Tengen. If you feel that you were responsible for Kurwamiri's death, there's no need for that. Gojo Satoru stepped forward, his voice low and measured. From beginning to end, the responsibility lies entirely with the ones who committed these acts. No, that's not it. Riko slowly lowered her head. It isn't a passing impulse. I've been thinking about it the whole way here, the people who tried to kill me, who killed Kurwa. They were trying to stop me from merging with Master Tengen. Weren't they? If that's the case, the only thing I can do for Kurwa myself, is to make sure their scheme fails. She lifted her face. There was a faint, released smile on it. I'm sorry, Gojo, Geto, I'm going to have to disappoint your good intentions. Besides, if I do nothing, then Kuruwa's death will have been completely meaningless. As she spoke, Riko pressed her palms against the floor and slowly, steadily rose to her feet. She took a step forward, then turned abruptly back, her gaze settling on Naoya, who had stood in silence through it all. Her eyes curved softly. Zenin Kohai, no Naoya. I sent you so many messages before, but in the end, there's nothing quite like seeing you one more time. The wind of the underground chamber stirred her long hair gently. She was like a leaf drifting deeper into the dark. Read more, Walnut-chan New History, Jujutsu X Miyaruko, oh no, am I a villain too? Help us hit our community goals, 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 62, Symbiotic Relationship, bonus chapter, 1472 words. Suguru Geto watched in silence as Amai Riko's silhouette disappeared at the far end of the corridor. Several times he lifted his foot to go after her, but the soles of his shoes seemed nailed to the ground, and in the end he didn't manage a single step. What is it, Geto? We should retrieve Kuruwa. Give her a proper burial. We should do that. Gojo Satoru lowered his head and walked quietly to Kuruwa's side, but before he reached her, he heard Suguru Geto speak again. Gojo Satoru had been almost entirely silent since Toji Fushiguro's death. He raised his eyes and looked at Geto. What do you mean? That assassin, he was hired by the Star religious group. He wasn't a believer himself. He did what he did purely for money. If he'd succeeded, he'd be out there right now, pockets full, living among ordinary people without a care in the world, wouldn't he? And the ones who sacrificed themselves for that grand cause of preserving the peace of ordinary society, those were people like Kuruwa. Like Riko. One side gives without asking for anything in return, and so the other side only grows more and more insatiable. I'm asking. Suguru Geto whispered it again, as though he were putting the question to himself. Geto, don't overthink it. Everyone walks the path they chose. Gojo Satoru gently lifted Kuruwa's body into his arms, then glanced over at Naoya, who was standing still with her eyes closed in quiet thought, and said, Let's go, then Zenin. No, something's not right. Naoya's eyes snapped open. The nagging wrongness she'd been carrying in her chest all this time detonated in a single instant. She furrowed her brow and looked between the two of them. I've been feeling strange about this the whole time, wasn't she the bait? What bait? Both Gojo Satoru and Suguru Geto blinked, exchanging a bewildered glance. Naoya looked at their completely lost expressions and felt her heart drop, and then, in an instant, it clicked. These two had no idea about any of it. No idea about the so-called inside truth, no idea that the real star plasma vessel candidate for Master Tengen had always been someone else entirely. Forget it. It's too complicated to explain to you two. Naoya clicked her tongue, too weary to waste any more words on it. The next second she activated projection sorcery, 24 frames of afterimages flashing into existence where she'd stood, and her body became a streak of light tearing through the air, shooting straight into the depths of the corridor in pursuit. Suguru Geto, startled, instinctively moved to follow, but Gojo Satoru caught his wrist. Let her go. Then what do we do? Geto's brow knitted tight. He held the tension for a moment, then released a slow breath, and arrived at his own answer. We can wait here a little longer. It's not as if it matters. Boosted by projection sorcery, Naoya caught up in a matter of breaths. But the moment she stepped out of the corridor, the layered underground architecture vanished, and the world had, at some unknown point, become a field of pure, unbroken white. What is this? Her mind went blank for a moment, then it clicked. This was Master Tengen's barrier technique. She looked ahead, but there was no sign of Amai Riko. She wheeled around, checked that the corridor entrance she'd come through was still visible behind her, and only once she'd confirmed her retreat was unblocked did she allow herself a fraction of calm. Though the exit might be an illusion, she reminded herself warily, and then a voice reached her, slightly muffled, coming from every direction at once. Girl of the Zenin estate, stop where you are. Master Tengen. Are you trying to stop me? Naoya identified the voice almost instantly. She raised her head and searched the boundless white, but couldn't find so much as a silhouette. You want to see me? Another time, I'd be quite glad to. Master Tengen's voice remained unhurried. But this is a critical moment. I'm afraid I cannot receive visitors. A critical moment? Are you in the middle of assimilating the star plasma vessel? Then perfect, give me back the girl who just wandered in by mistake, and I won't give you any trouble. I know she's nothing but bait. There's no need to be so greedy. A puzzled sound drifted down from above. What bait? It's true there is more than one star plasma vessel, but she is the only one who came of her own free will. Is that actually true? Naoya froze on the spot. Then what about the ones who didn't come willingly? I have never forced anyone who did not wish it. So that's how it actually is. Naoya murmured under her breath, her mind racing, and in an instant, the pieces fell into place. The star plasma vessel being killed was an event significant enough to shake the entire stability of the jujitsu world. The old men at the top of the jujitsu establishment, unwilling to trigger a panic, had spread the false story that the one who was killed was only a decoy, and even she, carrying memories from her previous life, had been thoroughly misled by that rumor. Which meant, the foundational premise of her plan, from the very beginning, had been completely wrong. Damn them, how dare they play me for a fool? No, actually, being played is the least of it. And besides, she couldn't exactly travel back to her previous life right now, and beat those rumor-mongering old bastards half to death. So then. She was quiet for a moment, then spoke again. All right. I'll take your word that you're not lying. Either way, she chose to assimilate with you herself. I was just being a busybody. Come to think of it, what was it that made her come here in the first place? Naoya laughed at herself softly, turned to head back, and then heard Master Tengen's voice rise again, calling after her, assimilation. I never said anything about assimilation. She arrived too late. The transformation of my body has already begun. Assimilation alone is no longer enough. What does that mean? Naoya's feet stopped dead. She spun back around. Allow me to explain. My technique is immortality, not agelessness. Though I cannot die, my physical body still ages and decays with the passage of time. Master Tengen's voice drifted through the white expanse, slow and echoing, carrying the faintest trace of exhaustion. When the decay of my body reaches its limit, the technique reconstructs it for me, transforming it towards something closer to a non-human energy being. The danger lies there. No one, including myself, can know with any certainty whether the Tengen that emerges from that transformation will still carry the will of the one before, and continue to see the maintenance of the Jujutsu world's order as its purpose. And so once every 500 years, I undergo assimilation with a compatible star plasma vessel, to delay this dehumanizing transformation. So what you're saying is... There was a tension in Naoya's voice that she herself hadn't noticed. By the time she arrived here just now, my transformation had already been set in motion. It is an irreversible process. I intended to send her away, but the child insisted on staying, on doing something. Master Tengen spoke slowly. So I offered her another proposal. Since assimilation is no longer possible, I would attune with her instead. What's the difference? It's somewhat difficult to explain. In essence, I would extract the information of her physical being, and have her bear a portion of the transforming force on my behalf. It cannot stop the transformation, but it raises a probability, the probability that the new being born from the transformation will retain some fundamental thread of humanity, rather than becoming something utterly monstrous, and evil that brings only ruin. What happens to Riko? Naoya's throat worked. She asked it anyway. There is no precedent, it cannot be predicted. For the first time, Master Tengen's voice carried a note of uncertainty. But my guess, if it succeeds, is that she will likely become a part of that transformed new being, coexisting with me, a presence that shares in my existence. Wentmore, Walnut-chan New History, Jujutsu X Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Let's reach these milestones together. 100 Power Stones equals +1 free chapter for all readers. Chapter 63, Twins of the Other Shore. 1441 words. Naoya Zenin sat at the edge of that boundless white world and waited in silence. Master Tengen had said the synchronization process would take roughly a day, but in this space there was no sun to rise or set, no cycle of light and dark, and so time had no way of measuring itself with any precision. It wasn't as though she absolutely had to stand watch. It was just, Master Tengen had also made it plain, even this synchronization carried the possibility of failure. If anything went wrong, if Master Tengen lost control entirely and became some unspeakable thing, she was here to respond at a moment's notice. After the brush with death that Toji Fushiguro had forced upon her, Naoya now, whatever came next, held fast to a conviction that she would find a way to win. Since there was nothing else to do, she might as well run through the current situation one more time. Naoya turned it over quietly in her mind. On the journey back from the Star Plasma Vessel cult headquarters to the college, roughly half of her spent cursed energy had recovered. She hadn't tested it in the field yet, but she had the dim, certain sense that she could now break past the 3-minute limit that had previously capped her technique and cursed energy output, that she could, if pressed, operate at full power. For now, though, Master Tengen's barrier was no place for that kind of trial. She shelved the thought. Next, the question of the reverse curse technique. Naoya had no desire to label her own method of generating positive energy with that name, but no matter how she turned it over, she couldn't find anything more fitting. That day, she had told Toji Fushiguro that, in the knife edge between life and death, she had seized hold of a second cursed energy that was her own. That was no bluff, no rhetorical cover. It was the truth. Her heart and brain had both taken fatal damage, and the body tissue of her former existence as a cursed spirit had begun surging uncontrolled from her wounds, wrapping around her, swallowing her piece by piece. In that moment, Naoya had felt it with perfect clarity. She was standing on the boundary between human and cursed spirit, and without any say in the matter, she was tilting, collapsing, falling toward the inhuman side. And it was then, for the first time in a long while, that she touched the cursed energy that belonged to her cursed spirit self. The cursed energy of her human self and the cursed energy of her cursed spirit self, two quantities sharing the same source yet opposed in nature, surfaced together in the extremity of near death, and overlapped. Almost by pure survival instinct, she drove the two into collision, into fusion, and the next instant, the positive energy that had previously belonged exclusively to the reverse curse technique detonated inside her. For a human, positive energy is a miracle cure, something that can rebuild flesh and resurrect the dead. For a cursed spirit, it is a lethal poison. Even the slightest contact with its core is enough to trigger the complete collapse and disintegration of the entire body. It was that sudden surge of positive energy that had let Naoya suppress the cursed spirit transformation running wild through her body. But the positive energy she could catalyze through this collision of two cursed energies was still brutishly crude in her hands. That she had managed to save both herself and Rico that day was entirely down to the sheer, almost uncanny volume of the output. She had simply forced it into the ruined flesh wholesale. Even now, she had found no way to wield it with any precision. For certain techniques, infusing the generated positive energy inward produces a technique reversal, an effect that runs diametrically opposite to the original technique, much like how Gojo Satoru's blue and red correspond to each other. Naobito's projection sorcery was not some ancient art with deep roots. Whether it even had a corresponding technique reversal form was anyone's guess. But one thing was beyond doubt: projection sorcery was a technique that demanded extreme precision, and with her present rough and ready control over positive energy, developing any kind of technique reversal was simply out of the question. Ah, right. There was also the cursed spirit form she had forcibly suppressed. Naoya had a quiet premonition. If she tried now to reach toward it, perhaps she could make it her own strength, too. Little Junior from the Zenin estate, little Naoya, time to wake up. Through the haze of half-consciousness, someone was gently stroking her hair, and a soft, warm voice was settling into her ear. Naoya slowly lifted her heavy eyelids and found herself looking up into Amiriko's gentle gaze, bent down toward her. I fell asleep. When had that happened? All she remembered was drifting through scattered, shapeless thoughts, and then, with no warning at all, she was out. Naoya was silent for a moment before she registered, belatedly, that her head was resting in Amiriko's lap. Junior from the Zenin estate, I'm returning the lap pillow from before. Nobody asked you to return it. Naoya twisted her stiff neck with poorly concealed awkwardness, and pushed herself up off the ground. You can stay a little longer, you know. Nobody wants to lie around in a place like this. Naoya rolled her sore shoulders, and let her gaze drift idly around her. Come to think of it, not comfortable at all, she noted privately, her eyes passing involuntarily over Riko's thighs. No wonder it felt hard. Ugh, Riko flinched sharply, pulled back with a wary look on her face. That look in your eyes is a little frightening. All right. Since things are settled here, let's go. Naoya turned on her heel, and took one step toward the exit, and Amiriko's voice came from behind her, we can't go anymore. Her steps froze. She turned around, her gaze landing on Riko. When they'd arrived, the girl had still been wearing the Rincho Girls' Academy uniform. Now that uniform, the one that had marked her as a student, as a person of the ordinary world, was nowhere to be seen. She was kneeling barefoot on the pale ground, dressed only in a plain white shift with no ornamentation at all. The me that exists now is already one with Master Tengen. I can't leave here anymore. Then what do you plan to do? She had not been entirely unprepared for this outcome. Naoya opened her mouth, then simply asked. I suppose I'll stay with Master Tengen and study sorcery and barrier techniques, and eventually help manage the barriers across the country, things like that. Amiriko smiled, her eyes curving warmly. Master Tengen said they'll take me on as a disciple. It sounds like it'll be very busy, I don't think I'll be bored. Naoya answered flatly, gave a small nod. In that case, I'll head back on my own. Amiriko opened her mouth as if to say something, then, in the end, said nothing. She could only watch as Naoya turned around and walked straight toward the exit of the Tomb Star Palace. Wait. A voice came suddenly from behind her. Naoya assumed it was Amiriko's and stopped, turning around with a frown. Now what? Girl of the Zenin estate, don't be in such a hurry to leave. There is one thing I must entrust to you. It was Amiriko's voice, and yet it felt entirely different. Naoya went very still. Then she saw it, standing behind Amiriko was another Amiriko. No, that wasn't right. She simply wore the same face, the same pure white dress, and the only difference from the Riko standing in front was her hair. It hung loose and unbound, and was, like this boundless space itself, a white that held no color at all. And those eyes, now looking straight at her, carrying a far deeper weight. It can't be you are. The guess rose unbidden, but the second Amiriko had already given the answer. I am Master Tengen. Here, Walnut-chan new history, Jujutsu x Miyaruko, oh no, am I a villain too? We have set new community milestones, 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for all readers. Chapter 64, you too. 1750 words. Seeing me take the form of your friend must be disorienting. But it is a natural consequence. When the physical form was reconstructed, the bodily information of the star plasma vessel was imprinted onto me as an energy body. The shock had not yet fully faded from Naoya's eyes as she stared at Master Tengen, now wearing Amiriko's face, and white hair, but already a gleeful, malicious delight was welling up from somewhere deep in her chest. So what you're saying is, you've become a woman, right? Ha 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 ha. She burst out laughing before she'd even finished the sentence, her shoulders shaking. It's all right, don't be too heartbroken about it, just grit your teeth, and it'll pass. I don't know why you find this amusing, but from the very beginning, from my first incarnation 1,000 years ago, I was born a woman. Though across the long ages I had nearly forgotten my own face, this is hardly what one would call becoming anything. Master Tengen's unruffled voice settled into Naoya's ears, and her laughter cut off dead. She froze as if someone had thrown a switch, and after a long, strangled moment, managed to squeeze out a single flat syllable. "What were you thinking?" Incomprehensible, the young people of this era. "Nothing, I just hadn't expected you to be a woman." "Then what did you expect me to be?" Master Tengen asked, wearing Riko's face, tilting their head ever so slightly. "I'd always sort of imagined you'd be the type with fleshy topknots growing out of your head, and earlobes hanging down to your shoulders, or maybe one of those figures in a white nightgown with a halo glowing above them." Naoya said, scrambling to fill the silence. "Those are the Buddha and Jesus Christ. How could you possibly conflate them with me? What's the difference, really? You're worshipped by that bizarre religious cult either way, aren't you? Those acts of personal veneration directed at me are, truly, entirely contrary to my own wishes. Enough, both of you, you're going to ruin the whole atmosphere of the farewell." Riko dropped to her knees on the ground, and let out a sudden shout, her fists clenched, startling both Naoya and Master Tengen into stunned silence. Neither of them had ever heard her produce a sound that loud. Ahem, ahem. "I'll be going, then." Naoya gave a casual wave of her hand, as if to brush it all off. Riko, seeing this, lifted her head and spoke with some hesitation. "Little Naoya. And about Kurwa, her affairs, after everything?" Yes, I know, I won't forget." Naoya nodded, feeling vaguely like she'd been appointed somebody's errand girl. "And one more thing," Master Tengen cut in abruptly, "during the physical reconstruction and attunement phase, I briefly lost my perception of the barriers, and was forced to leave them in automatic mode. When I re-examined the Treasury's barrier just now, I discovered that part of the special-grade cursed object, the 9 phases of the cursed womb, has been stolen. The intruder's barrier technique was of an exceptionally high level. They left no trace whatsoever. Please inform the Jujutsu High personnel in the outside world of this matter, and have them strengthen their vigilance." Every trace of ease vanished from Naoya's face in an instant. Her pupils snapped tight. Who did this? Impossible, how could anyone? But the more she turned it over, the more it seemed only one answer remained. She bit down on her back teeth, and forced the words out through the gaps, "The Kamo family. Damn it, we've been played. The 9 phases of the cursed womb, 9 abominations brought into being several hundred years ago through forbidden, inhuman experimentation by the then head of the Kamo family, Kamo Noritoshi. At the time, there existed a singular woman capable of bearing the offspring of cursed spirits. Kamo Noritoshi subjected her to 9 pregnancies, and 9 abortions, binding each of the 9 stillborn with a seal that rendered them in a state of suspended life, neither capable of harming the outside world, nor capable of being destroyed by any externally cultivated force, and fashioned them into special-grade cursed objects. So do you understand now? What it is I intend to do to you?" In a cold, sealed room, a mature woman with short black hair framing her ears slowly turned around, her gaze falling on the blonde girl in front of her, 14 or 15 years old, dressed like a fashionable delinquent. The girl was bound fast to a chair, trembling uncontrollably, her eyes flooded with a terror on the verge of total collapse. "And no, I don't understand. You're insane, let me go. Let me go home." The girl's voice was shaking apart at the seams, tears and cold sweat dripping to the floor. She was already sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, choking out broken, desperate pleas. You please let me go home, Dad, Mom, it's all right. You'll have a new family very soon." The woman smiled, and with the blonde girl's terrified eyes fixed upon her, pressed the dark violet-black embryo she held in her hand into the girl's mouth. Disgusting, no, GLK. Struggling with everything she had, but unable to stop herself from swallowing that revolting, alien thing down whole, the blonde girl went blank for a single instant, and then her body erupted into violent convulsions. First she went entirely rigid, her pupils unfocused and glassy for just a moment, and the next second, agony beyond all reckoning crashed through every inch of her like a tsunami. It hurts, the girl's body seized and thrashed in extreme convulsions. Crimson spread across her skin at a visible speed, flooding her eye sockets, her nostrils, the corners of her mouth, even every single pore across her entire body, all of it gushing scalding blood in a frenzy, and within moments she was submerged entirely in a thick, searing slick of red. The woman took one unhurried half-step back, arms folded, watching the girl thrash and spasm through the pool of blood with the calm appreciation of someone admiring a carefully sculpted work, until the girl tore through her own restraints and rolled across the floor, until the body's strength was utterly spent, until she lay perfectly still, as though she had simply stopped breathing. A faint smile on her lips, the woman stared down at the girl collapsed on the ground, her entire body now dyed completely red beneath the blood, and curled the corner of her mouth. "Choso, stop playing dead over there. I selected her constitution specifically. She won't die that easily." The next instant, the blood coating the so-called corpse stirred, as though it had been granted life, and slowly began to draw back into the girl's body. The bloodstains vanished entirely, as if they had never existed at all. At that moment, the blonde girl slowly rose to her feet, and her face was barely recognizable as the same person. Sunken eye sockets, ringed by deep, heavy shadows of blue-black, an aura of sullen, oppressive malice radiating from her frame, wholly at odds with that young body. She first raised one arm, looked down at this entirely unfamiliar flesh, and after a long moment finally raised her eyes to meet the dark-haired woman's. "Who are you?" "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that I have a use for you, Choso." The woman lifted her chin slightly and looked down at her. Indeed, standing there now, the girl's body had been possessed, and inhabited by the 9 phases of the cursed womb. "Kechizu and Juzo are within you, aren't they? Hand them over." Choso did not take the woman's bait. She said coldly, "And if I refuse?" "Then do as I ask, and I'll give them back to you." The woman pressed a hand to her own chest and smiled. A vivid red line of blood appeared across the bridge of her nose and spread across her face. Choso said nothing, only let scarlet beads of blood gather at the tips of her fingers. This was the blood manipulation technique. "Mai, are you certain you want to make a move against me, under these circumstances?" The woman raised an eyebrow and turned, her gaze drifting to the window. Beyond the glass lay a modern city ablaze with neon lights and packed with traffic, a world utterly transformed from what it had been 100 years before. Take a good look at the world out there. You've only just arrived. Even if you killed me, how would you find your footing in a place like this? And with all your brothers in tow. Brothers? Choso was silent for a moment, then corrected her, word by deliberate word. "Even if you had me possess a body like this, we of the 9 phases will always be brothers. Choso, even though, through all those long ages of being sealed away, you retained the barest minimum of consciousness, you 9 of the 9 phases have never truly been born, not once. Only at this very moment have you obtained genuine life." The woman withdrew her gaze and looked back at her, her tone heavy with meaning. "What manner of existence to inhabit, what road to walk, that is something you must now discover for yourself, through lived experience." Choso stood where she was. The cursed energy churning around her slowly stilled, the blood gathered at her fingertips quietly dissipated. She remained motionless for a long while before finally speaking again. "Tell me the task." At that, the woman's face finally broke into a smile of satisfaction. She spoke clearly, enunciating each syllable. "Yuji Itadori, find this person, embed yourself at his side, and await orders." "Who is he?" Choso narrowed her eyes, gave a careless wave of one arm, and said, "Never mind, whoever he is, anyone who ends up in the sights of someone like you probably isn't headed anywhere good. So there's no point asking." Chapter 65, Cursed Corpse, Bonus Chapter, 1549 words originally. Naoya should have set out immediately and gone straight back to the Zenin estate. Naobita was, by long habit, a dedicated drunk, the sort of man who, even if she vanished for several days without a word, would most likely not bother to look for her. But if she stayed gone too long with no contact whatsoever, it was hard to imagine him not eventually coming to find her. Still, because of the funeral arrangements for Kurwamiri, Naoya chose to stay a few days at Jujutsu High. Come to think of it, did this place, which so proudly billed itself as an institution for training sorcerers, actually manage to recruit students? The dormitory room she had temporarily stayed in a year ago was exactly as she had left it, not a single thing rearranged, which made her genuinely wonder whether any new students had been willing to walk through the doors of this relentlessly gloomy school. "How does it fit, little Zenin?" Yeri Shoko stood behind her, both hands resting on Naoya's shoulders, the two of them facing a full-length mirror. The bodies of children this age were truly remarkable things. Over the course of a single year she had shot up fast, already standing at around 150 centimeters, just barely enough to wear the Jujutsu High uniform at its minimum. The school uniform was solid black throughout, which made it at least passable for attending a funeral. Though apparently on occasion, certain problem students who had difficulty controlling their own power would be issued a white uniform upon enrollment, a visible warning to distinguish them from the rest. Shoko and Naoya stepped out one after the other and found Gojo Satoru, Suguru Geto, and their teacher, Masamichi Yaga, already waiting outside the door. "You look good, Zenin, sure you won't reconsider joining Jujutsu High?" Yaga said. "Not a chance." Naoya turned to Shoko and lowered her voice. "What's he here for?" "Ah well, for a funeral, someone needs to officiate, don't they? None of us have ever done anything like this before," Shoko said, pulling a pained face. "Then let's go." Yaga swept his gaze across the four of them, said nothing more, and simply took the lead, walking slowly toward the hill behind Jujutsu High. No one spoke. The buildings grew sparse, giving way to thick, lush woodland. The path narrowed until the five of them had to fall into single file to pass through. Naoya raised her eyes and looked ahead, past the staggered tree-line. She made out a stretch of old cemetery. Tombstones of gray and black stood at varying heights, their surfaces mottled and worn by wind and rain, spreading from the foot of the hill all the way to its crest. "This is Jujutsu High's cemetery. Sorcerers and assistant managers who fall in battle, if there is no family to receive them, they are interred here," Yaga said, stopping and turning to face them. "There are so many." Suguru Geto's pupils contracted sharply. "The majority are assistant managers. Full sorcerers account for roughly 1 in 5, Yaga added. Kurwamiri's remains had already been laid out in the cemetery, placed in a cypress wood coffin, surrounded on all sides by flowers. The grave had been dug in advance, all that remained now was the burial. Yaga stepped up to stand before the coffin and cleared his throat. Miss Kurwamiri's life came to an end on the day she turned 27. We do not seek to assign meaning to death, but the fact that Miss Kurwamiri gave her life for the sake of her family is a truth that can never be erased. Masamichi Yaga delivered no prepared eulogy, he simply spoke, off the cuff, a few words. Naoya watched this funeral of 5 people, and found it all rather bleak. She was here on behalf of Amaya Riko, to see Kurwamiri off on her final journey. If it were Riko, would she have wanted Kurwa's funeral to be this quiet? "Then I'll leave it at that." Yaga suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Come on out, all of you." And then Naoya heard it, a strain of mournful Western music drifting into her ears. Where was that music coming from? An orchestra. Naoya looked up instinctively, and there, emerging slowly from the depths of the dense woodland, was a small band. But the members of this band were no ordinary humans. They were a collection of utterly endearing stuffed animal puppets, around a dozen of them, the tallest reaching only to an adult's waist. A yellow and white kitten drew a bow across strings, a blue-green frog puppet blew a trumpet, a round, plump panda beat a drum, a stout, broad-shouldered gorilla held a flute to its lips and played softly. "These are cursed corpses," Naoya murmured, glancing sideways at Yaga. Right, this man's technique was the creation of cursed corpses that obeyed his will and could move of their own accord. There was no question. Every one of these animal puppets before her was a cursed corpse. She had heard rumors before that the cursed corpses Masamichi Yaga created were no mindless puppets, but beings possessed of their own individual consciousness. Naoya narrowed her eyes slightly, the tips of her fingers curling inward without thinking. If the rumors were true, then such a thing, for the rule-bound world of sorcery, for the lofty 3 great families, was undeniably a potential threat that could not be ignored. She watched the scene before her in silence, turning the thought over quietly in her mind, wanting to verify the rumor more concretely. The piece ended, the drums and instruments fell still, and the five of them found themselves surrounded by Yaga's cursed corpses. The cold, spare funeral felt just slightly more alive. Now, then, let us say our farewells to Miss Kurwa. Yaga announced the next portion. Papa, what happened to her? The little yellow kitten cursed corpse asked, its voice small and wondering. She died, Masamichi Yaga said, bowing his head, his tone gentle and even as he spoke to the little cat cursed corpse. What is dying? The kitten tilted its head, eyes full of incomprehension. It means she can never wake up again. She can never meet or speak with the people she wanted to see. She has gone away forever. The yellow kitten went still for a moment, its small body going faintly rigid, and then, in a trembling voice on the verge of tears, it said, Then, does that mean she can never see her mother again? Before the words had even finished, it raised its tiny stuffed paws, and pressed them to its eyes, beginning to sob with heartbroken little hiccups. That childlike weeping seemed to carry some inexplicable contagion. In an instant it spread through the cursed corpses gathered all around. How sad. Naoya opened her mouth, utterly unprepared for the fact that the first to shed tears of grief for Kurwamiri's passing at this funeral was not any of the humans present, but these beings that looked for all the world like stuffed toys. It doesn't matter. Never mind. She glanced once at Masamichi Yaga standing beside her, his expression perfectly composed, then stepped forward and walked up to the cypress wood coffin. Amid the sound of the cursed corpses weeping all around them, Naoya, Gojo Satoru, Suguru Geto, and Shoko stood without a word and slowly lowered the lid of Kurwamiri's coffin. Zenin, the three of us have a mission to head out for. The 9-phase diagram has gone missing. We still need to find some way to track it down. Whenever you're ready to leave, go find Teacher Yaga. Oh, right, he's about to be promoted to principal. When the funeral ended, Gojo Satoru gave a casual wave, and left ahead of the others with Geto and Shoko. The cursed corpses had disappeared somewhere. Naoya and Yaga made their way back along the same path they had come. After eating lunch in the Jujutsu High cafeteria, Yaga appeared before her yet again. Someone wants to see you. Naoya raised an unenthusiastic eyebrow. She had been planning to head back to the Zenin estate as soon as she finished eating. It won't take long. Yaga shook his head. Naoya pushed her empty tray forward and fell in behind him. The two of them descended to the basement level, stopping in front of the Jujutsu High morgue. What are we doing in a place like this? Naoya looked at the morgue door. Wait, don't tell me the person inside is. I told you, someone wants to see you. Yaga pulled the door open. Naoya narrowed her eyes, and then she saw her, a tall woman with blonde hair, standing at the foot of the bed where a body had been laid out, studying it carefully. Sensing the commotion at the door, she snapped her head up and looked over. You're here, may I ask you a question? Tell me, what type of girl do you like? Chapter 66. The dead Zhuge Liang scares away the living Zhongda. 14-17 words. Is this woman out of her mind? Naoya narrowed her eyes and studied the golden-haired woman in front of her, finger resting lightly against her lips, dressed in cycling gear. I wouldn't say I have a particular type, but at the very minimum, at least be obedient, won't you? Do your part first. Everything else comes after. She answered without much thought. I was sure you'd say I had a screw loose. After all, asking a question like that to a little junior. Naoya's answer had a bit of an edge to it, but the golden-haired woman looked like the sort of person who could swallow any reply whole without blinking. She straightened up and smiled. The way you talk, you barely sound like you think of yourself as a girl at all. But well, I suppose that counts as an answer. The woman let the flippancy drop from her expression, and extended her hand toward Naoya. Special grade sorcerer, Yuki Tsukumo. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Oh, Naoya paused, turning the name over. I know you. I didn't realize my reputation had already reached the children. Yuki Tsukumo laughed behind her hand, only for Naoya's follow-up to deflate her entirely. Of course. You're that special grade sorcerer who neglects her duties and runs wild overseas all day, aren't you? You could at least respect a person's ambitions. Yuki Tsukumo pulled a long, mournful face. Naoya spared her theatrics a single glance, then stepped forward to the mortuary slab. She looked down at the body laid out beneath her, the great cavity torn through chest and abdomen covered with a white cloth. Toji Fushiguro's remains. After a moment she spoke. What's this? You have some special interest in corpses. How rude. I simply find his death a waste. Yuki Tsukumo studied Toji for a moment, then shook her head. I wouldn't have expected a special grade sorcerer to be so sentimental. Personally, I'm more curious about what becomes of his cursed tools. Naoya glanced at Toji, then at Yuki Tsukumo. Why don't we just give him to you while we're at it? He's your clansman, isn't he? Are you sure you should be saying things like that? Yuki Tsukumo tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Naoya only shook her head. If you'd said that while he was still alive, he'd have sprung up and taken your head off on the spot. She cast a sidelong glance at Toji and gave a cold smile. But he can't get up anymore. That does make sense. Yuki Tsukumo rested her chin in her hand, but then fixed Naoya with a long, searching look that made the girl distinctly uncomfortable. What's with that look? Yuki Tsukumo glanced away. Nothing really. I'm just curious, why do you speak so harshly about Toji, and yet you're going out of your way to defend him in circles? Are you done yet? Forget about someone like him. What I actually care about is whether Jujutsu High is going to return his cursed tools to the Zenin estate, or not. They've been confiscating them. Naoya's voice shot up a full octave as she said it bluntly. Yuki Tsukumo could only wave a weary hand and say, in a musing tone, asking me won't do you any good, I'm not part of Jujutsu High. And besides, Toji's cursed tools weren't from the Zenin estate to begin with, were they? I wasn't expecting you to bring me back any souvenirs. But what exactly did you bring back? At the gate of the Zenin estate, Naoya hopped down from the front passenger seat, and rose on her tiptoes to pull open the hearse's rear compartment door, turning her head toward Naobito as she did. Don't be frightened, come take a look. Getting this back cost me no small amount of effort. Come see, everyone, and call whoever else, yes. Zenin Jinichi too, bring him over. Naobito stroked his beard and approached slowly, then stopped short with a blink. Well, is this Toji? He peered at the body inside the hearse for a moment. Dead like that, are you? I can barely recognize you anymore. Straightening up, he turned to the guard standing behind him and said, Go on, fetch Jinichi. Have him come and make the identification. Zenin Jinichi and Toji Fushiguro were brothers, both sons of the previous clan head, though in terms of appearance, the difference between Jinichi and Toji was striking enough to make one wonder whether a mix-up had been made at birth. Naoya looked up ahead. After a short while, she watched a broad-shouldered, heavily bearded Zenin Jinichi come striding over. My lord, what has happened? Naobito gave a casual wave, gesturing toward the hearse as though presenting a curiosity. Jinichi, come have a look at this. Zenin Jinichi stepped forward with a puzzled frown, and then his pupils snapped tight. Is that an enemy of the Zenin clan? He narrowed his eyes and edged closer. As his eyes adjusted to the dimness inside the compartment, a cry of shock tore out of him. What? He shuddered from head to toe and stumbled backward, landing hard on the ground. Watching his look of pure, dumbstruck terror, Naoya burst out laughing. This must be what they mean by the dead Zhuge Liang putting the living Zhongda to flight. Jinichi, have you read the Three Kingdoms? Naobito clasped his hands in his sleeves, chuckling. They say a great general doesn't so much as change expression when a mountain crumbles before him. Look at the state of you, how am I supposed to promote you like this? Yes, your reprimand is entirely correct, my lord. Zenin Jinichi bowed his head in shame first, then craned his neck back toward the hearse with a nervous, hesitant look. He's really dead? It would appear so. No real chance of revival. Naobito shook his head. Who did it? Zenin Jinichi scrambled to his feet. Who could possibly have killed him? Good question, who did it? Naobito turned to look at Naoya, standing beside the vehicle. The motion made Zenin Jinichi startle as well, only now registering that Naoya had been there the entire time. Naoya tilted her head, thought for a moment, then answered with certainty. Right, it was the 6 eyes of the Gojo family. He also seized the cursed tools, and had them impounded at Jujutsu High. Choso, do you know? For human beings, judging others by their appearance is an utterly commonplace thing. A person's looks can determine whether they are accepted by society, and that matters even more than ability. On a street in Iwate Prefecture, a sullen-faced, disheveled blonde Jiru trudged along behind a composed, dark-haired woman. What are you trying to say? The eldest of the cursed womb paintings, Choso, hunched his shoulders and glowered, his uniform shirt and plaid skirt the same set he'd been wearing for days, now creased and fraying. My, I go to all the trouble of finding you such an adorable body, and you treat it like this. The dark-haired woman glanced at Choso. I did warn you before. None of that matters to me. Choso's expression darkened as he pressed on. More to the point, where exactly is the Yuji Itadori you mentioned? You want to hear about Yuji again? Of course, where did we leave off last time? Ah yes, he was 3 months old. The woman began counting on her fingers, meticulously recounting. Stop playing dumb, whatever you're planning, you're going to end up dead in the end anyway. Choso turned back in irritation, and in the next instant, the woman who had been behind him was simply gone. Where did she tch? His heart lurched. He spun left and right and realized, with a jolt, that he had not sensed her departure in the slightest. Choso turned in a bewildered circle, and then, from somewhere behind him, came a voice, Excuse me, miss, do you need any help? Walnut-chan New History, Jujutsu X Miyaruko, oh no, am I a villain too? 100 Power Stones equals +1 bonus chapter for everyone. Chapter 67, just this once, bonus chapter, 1474 words. Zenin Toji's whole sorry mess was, at any rate, dumped back into the Zenin estate's hands to deal with. For Toji himself, being left by the roadside after death for the stray dogs to pick over would probably have been a better fate than falling into the clutches of the Zenin clan. But what could be done about it? The world of jujutsu sorcery had always been this way. The winner takes all, and the loser can't even decide where his own bones will rest. Naoya Zenin put all the clinging, tedious business behind her, and walked with a light step toward the mountain cottage. She was still some distance from the front door when she looked up and spotted, crouching alone by the clear stream at the gate, a small figure in a deep crimson kimono. One glance was all it took, she recognized that silhouette immediately. It was Maki. She lifted her eyes to check the sky. It was clearly far too early for the private school to have let out. What was this about? Skipping class? TCH, hadn't she already arranged a new tutor for them? There hadn't been any trouble in the past year. Then again, this was the sort of person who'd kick up waves even on a perfectly calm day, so it wasn't exactly surprising. A thoroughly incorrigible troublemaker through and through, only this time, she'd apparently skipped class without dragging Mai along. Had she suddenly grown a conscience? Naoya was in an uncommonly good mood today. Looking at Maki crouched by the stream, spacing out at the flowing water without moving a muscle, a mischievous impulse bubbled up from somewhere inside her. In her past life as Naoya Zenin, the male Naoya, every time she had seen Maki with that look of hers, bowing to no one, insufferably high on herself, a twisted, obsessive malice would well up in her chest. She had to tear that expression apart, she had to watch that face contort with rage and humiliation before she felt any satisfaction. Back then, there had been no shortage of ways to pick at her. A fraction of an error in training form, a speck of dust left unswept, if she'd wanted an excuse, there were always plenty, enough to grind anyone underfoot. Right, there's nothing to be afraid of from this girl anymore. Same as before, she's always been someone without much worth, the kind who exists just to be someone else's amusement. She held her breath, reined in every trace of her cursed energy, lightened her footsteps, and crept toward Maki's back like a cat. From this angle, one gentle push was all it would take, and she'd get to watch her tumble into the stream, soaked to the bone and utterly wretched. Just as Naoya's fingertips were about to graze Maki's back, the girl below her suddenly snapped her head up. Sister. The moment their eyes met, Naoya's heart lurched. Damn it, how had she been noticed? She had deliberately suppressed her presence, not left a single gap. She couldn't figure out where she'd slipped up. Her fingertips had already carried through on their own momentum, but in nearly the same instant, Maki suddenly flung both arms wide open and grabbed Naoya by the shoulders. Over the past year Maki and my had both shot up considerably. Maki's head now came up to just below Naoya's chest. A dull, heavy thud. She'd had time to catch herself, but the shock from a moment ago had rattled her so badly that her body simply failed to react, and she was swept along with Maki, both of them tumbling together into the stream. Ice-cold water surged in instantly through her collar and sleeves, a bone-deep chill spreading across her skin, soaking both of their clothes through in the blink of an eye. How dare you ambush me? Naoya finally came to her senses, having utterly forgotten that she'd been the one with ill intentions to begin with, remembering only that this girl had used her as a landing cushion. She was on the verge of blowing up, but then she suddenly felt her body being wrapped in Maki's arms with all the strength the girl had. Sister, you're back. I'm so glad. Their bodies pressed tightly together. Naoya lay on her back in the cold water, and looked up to find Maki's face pressed against her chest like a magnet, rubbing gently with the top of her head. The strange sensation of weight against her chest traveled finely through her nerves. I should have listened to Yeri Shoko when she said I should at least wrap something around myself. The embarrassing thought flickered through Naoya's mind and was gone. Lying face up in the pebbled stream, her long hair fanning out around her like seaweed, she didn't bother tending to any of it, she simply let the girl in her arms press close. Before long, she noticed something was wrong. Maki's state was wrong. This was nothing like the Maki of ordinary days. The usual Maki was never this clingy, she hadn't been this way before Naoya left, and setting aside what she knew from her previous life, Maki would never, under any circumstances, show herself this soft and fragile. She paused, raised both hands, reached around the girl's back, and gently pressed them against the back of Maki's head. What happened? Maki buried her face in Naoya's chest and said nothing. Naoya only felt her tighten her grip, arms trembling faintly. Mai and we've been separated. That day, during class at the private school, Mai had been distracted all morning, and then she suddenly fainted. And then they said. Mai had awakened her technique, and they took her away. I ran after them and asked where they were taking Mai. The tutor said that from now on, Mai would be taken somewhere else for specialized training. Mai on her own, is definitely going to get picked on. I said I'd go with her but they said I wasn't qualified. Everyone at the private school said Mai isn't my little sister anymore. From now on, she's a sorcerer. A proper one. I don't understand, even if she becomes a proper sorcerer, does that mean Mai can't be my sister anymore? Maki raised her head, squeezing her eyes shut. The good mood Naoya had been brimming with vanished without a trace. Her thoughts turned to chaos, as though her head had been stuffed with a wad of waterlogged cotton. She didn't know what to say. All she could do was shift her body in the cold water, and reach out to scoop the girl up in her arms. Sister. Enough already. Naoya looked away, but her fingertips tightened without her noticing. Your clothes are soaked through, doesn't it feel awful against your skin? Come back with me first, get cleaned up, change into something dry. Hot water thundered into the bathtub. Naoya reached in to test the temperature, and once she was satisfied it was right, she straightened up, turned around, and tipped her chin toward the figure standing at the doorway. All right, in you go. She paused, watching as Maki stood quietly behind her, the crimson kimono sash coming undone, the fabric sliding down to pool at her feet. Maki murmured softly in reply and carefully climbed in over the rim of the tub. The warm water rose past her ankles, but she didn't immediately sink down into it. What about sister? Sister's soaking wet too, won't you? I'll manage on my own in a bit. But you'll catch a cold, won't you? That's none of your business. So then, does sister not want me either? Maki said suddenly. That's right. I don't want you. Naoya answered without thinking, and then looked up to find Maki staring back at her blankly, her face expressionless, and yet somehow every expression at once hidden inside her eyes. When sister is here, we're sister's little sisters. Sister gives us our baths. When sister isn't here, I take care of I'm her big sister then. We always bathed together, I'd scrub her hair for her, I'd wash her back. And now I've been separated from and sister is always leaving and gone for so long. So what am I now? Naoya didn't know why, but something in that expression frightened her. She snapped her head away, and then sighed. All right. You want to be sure, is that it? As if guided by something beyond herself, her fingers moved stiffly toward the buttons of her clothes, just this once. Chapter 68, Jujitsu Sorcerer's Dream, Bonus Chapter, 1443 words. The words had barely left her mouth before a faint pang of regret bloomed somewhere in Naoya Zenin's chest. But what was said, water spilled couldn't be gathered back, and to walk it back now would only make her look uncertain, like she had something to hide. She hooked her fingertips around the hem of her jacket and drew it upward, slowly, inch by inch. It was the warm season. She wore only a light slip underneath, and at this moment she wished, almost desperately, that she could somehow conjure several dozen more layers onto her body, anything to stretch the undressing out a little longer. Clothes, of course, refused to multiply on their own. A moment was all it took, and she was standing there bare. She looked up and walked straight into Maki's gaze. The girl was draped over the edge of the bathtub, both eyes fixed on her without so much as a blink. The tips of Naoya Zenin's ears burned. She steeled herself and spoke. What are you staring at? Come on, sis, hurry up, the water's going to go cold. Stop rushing me. It'll only take a minute. She snapped back out of habit and only then noticed, with a small jolt, that at some point she had crossed both arms firmly over her chest. That involuntary, defensive posture, caught in the full beam of Maki's unabashed stare, produced a peculiar and nameless embarrassment. Whether to escape that gaze or to cover some flicker of agitation she couldn't quite name, she bit her lower lip, stepped forward, and climbed quickly into the tub. Happy now? Naoya Zenin parted her legs slightly to let Maki settle between them, and warm water rose to her chest, smoothing over taut skin. The tension she'd been carrying loosened just a little. Maki leaned back against her, the back of her head nestled softly into the curve of Naoya's neck, and tilted her face up to look at her. Where did you go this time, sis? Naoya Zenin had one thought and one thought only, get through this bath as fast as possible. She had zero interest in small talk. She squeezed a generous glob of shampoo into her palm, worked it roughly into lather, and pressed it onto Maki's hair with the air of someone completing an obligatory chore. Nowhere in particular. Then next time, will you take Maki along? Maki swayed her body a little, as if wheedling. Because you're too weak. I'm not weak. No one at the prep school runs faster than me, and no one climbs higher than me. That's weak. Naoya Zenin's palm rested on top of Maki's head, and she watched the girl squint contentedly, like a small cat being stroked the right way, until Maki spoke. Then, if I became a sorcerer too, could I go with you? Maki opened her eyes as she said it. The hand massaging her hair froze. For a moment, Naoya Zenin couldn't find a single word to say. The girl in her arms, getting no answer, squirmed restlessly instead, and the loose strands across her forehead, foam-soaked and drifting, caught her straight in the eyes. She let out an immediate wail of ow, her eyes going red on the spot. Naoya Zenin clicked her tongue, released Maki's hair, reached over, and unhooked the showerhead. Turn around. Maki turned obediently, still sniffling. The girl's small hands were pressed over her eyes, which were red all around the rims, lashes beaded with water and foam. Somehow, that pitiful little face was not at all irritating. If anything, she found it rather easier to look at. Naoya Zenin gentled her movements, turned the pressure down, and the temperature a notch lower, cupped the back of Maki's neck, and let a soft stream of water rinse the foam from her eyes. She asked, keeping her voice low. "Can't open them?" Maki said, aggrieved. A moment more of rinsing. "It still stings a little. Honestly, it's clean, I promise." Naoya Zenin gave up, tossed the showerhead back against the tub's edge, reached out, cupped Maki's face in both hands, steadied it gently with her fingertips, bent down, and blew softly against the reddened corner of her eye. Okay. It doesn't hurt any more, I can see." Maki blinked furiously until the last of the water blinked away, and her vision finally cleared. But the moment she recovered, she picked the thread right back up where she had dropped it, stubborn as ever. "Then why can my, and not me?" The cutting answer nearly came out on its own, "Because you have no cursed energy. You can't even see curses. If you hadn't been born into the Zenin estate, you'd never have had the slightest connection to the world of sorcery, not in this lifetime." But she bit it back at the last instant. She had no patience, not here, sitting naked in a bathtub, to pick apart this kind of mess with a small child. She simply retrieved the showerhead in silence and rinsed every last trace of foam from Maki's hair, then ran the spray down her little body until all the suds were gone. Then she spoke. "All done. You're washed. Out you go, my turn." "But you still haven't told me why." Maki stood at the edge of the tub, still not budging, pressing the question once more. Naoya Zenin drew a long, slow breath and modulated her voice. "Tell you what, go out first, and when I'm done washing, I'll explain everything. Right now, out." At that, Maki finally gave a small, dutiful nod, stepped out of the tub, snatched up the towel hanging nearby, bundled herself up in it, and pattered out of the bathroom in quick little steps. At last, the door clicked shut with a firm bang. The tension that had been wound through Naoya Zenin's body the whole way home released all at once, and she slid back against the tub wall, spine meeting cool porcelain, and breathed deep, ragged breaths, as though every last reserve of strength had been spent. Naoya Zenin dropped her soaked jacket into the laundry basket, changed into a fresh, unadorned kimono, and pushed aside the bathroom curtain to step back out. She had been bracing herself for the question of how to handle Maki, but it turned out she had been worrying for nothing. Children's attention flitted everywhere at once, they couldn't hold to one thing for long. In the blink of an eye Maki had already forgotten all about becoming a sorcerer, and was absorbed in flipping through one of the prep school textbooks. Naoya Zenin had come all this way back to the Zenin estate, only to be run ragged the moment she walked in the door. She collapsed onto the bed exhausted, and lay there gazing at Maki's back as the girl idly turned pages. So then, after meeting Toji, did it actually manage to wipe that counterfeit out of my head? She closed her eyes slowly, then shook her head. Trying to use Toji to negate Maki was a shortcut, a cheap one, and the more she reached for that kind of sideways trick, the darker the shadow that girl cast inside her. She opened her eyes again, propped herself up on one elbow, and looked steadily at Maki. Even now, she wasn't entirely sure whether she ought to lay the image of this guileless, unknowing child over the cold, hard-faced Maki of her past life, but if it was something that could make her truly strong hey, didn't you just say you wanted to become a... The sound of the door lock turning cut her off mid-sentence. Naoya Zenin and Maki turned at almost the same instant, both looking toward the entrance. A maid stumbled in through the doorway, face drained white, calling out, "Miss Mai. Miss Mai, are you in here?" Only then, belatedly, did she register the person sitting composed in the room. The maid lurched back half a step, shoulders flinching, and cried out, You're finally back. Miss Mai has gone missing. We've been searching everywhere, no one knows where she's run off to." Seek, Walnut-chan New History, Jujutsu X Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Let's hit these goals. 100 Power Stones equals 1 extra chapter for the public. Chapter 69, Mangy Dog 1986 words. The veneration of strength was the Zenin estate's law of survival, that much was beyond dispute. Sorcerers were the one and only foundation on which this vast clan continued to exist. No exceptions were made for either the main line or its branch families. Generally speaking, cursed energy and techniques did not particularly favor any one bloodline. A perfectly ordinary couple might produce a child born as a natural medium, while a couple of powerful sorcerers stood only marginally better odds than common folk of producing an heir who would inherit their technique. The reason the three great sorcerer families had managed to hold their place at the very summit of the jujitsu world for thousands of years lay precisely in this, generation upon generation of bloodline screening, by which technique and cursed energy could be passed down through the family name with a relative degree of stability. The clan bred offspring with a near-fanatical mania, yet most of those children were doomed from the start to serve as mere foils. The sole reason for raising up all those frail, mewling babies was to sift, out of hundreds upon thousands of descendants from the main and branch lines, the precious few who could awaken a technique. Children capable of awakening a technique would, for the most part, reveal their gift around the age of 5 or 6. The wellspring of a technique was already etched into the flesh and blood, and once awakened, it would, like the act of breathing, let its bearer know instinctively the most rudimentary methods of its use. But the fine control of cursed energy, the disciplines and forms of life-or-death combat, these, in the end, had to be taught systematically by adult sorcerers. Only thus could a child one day grow into a blade sharp enough to support the clan. Miss Mai was discovered to have awakened her technique 1 week ago, and was immediately sent over to Mr. Chujuru. The basic jujitsu education of every newly fledged sorcerer in the clan has always been entrusted entirely to Mr. Chujuru. For the past few days, right up through this morning, everything had been perfectly fine. But this afternoon, just as lessons were about to begin, Miss Mai suddenly vanished. Mr. Chujuru is right now, in an absolute fury. A week ago, so that means Mai awakened her technique, just 3 days after I left. Having listened to the maid lay out the whole sequence of events from beginning to end, Naoya rubbed at her brow in irritation. The three great families, Chujuru, a short, stooped old man from a branch line of the clan, whose technique was rock manipulation, who had spent long years grinding away in the squad only to remain stuck at quasi-grade 1, that was the entirety of what she could recall about Zenin Chujuru. Sis, I told you, Mai's definitely gone and hidden somewhere because she got bullied. Maki was gripping the sleeve of her kimono with white-knuckled determination. Let's hurry up and go find her. Naoya let out a small click of her tongue, pursed her lips, and looked up at the maid. The woman bowed deeply, her voice strained and rushed. I've passed on the full situation to both of you, young ladies. The reason I came here was because I thought Miss Mai might also be in this part of the estate. Since she isn't, I'll keep on looking for her. Before her words had even fully landed, before Naoya had so much as a chance to respond, she turned on her heel, and hurried off at a brisk pace. She did, in fact, look genuinely frantic. Sis, hurry up. We have to go too. Maki puffed out her cheeks and tugged at Naoya with everything she had, trying to drag her forward. Honestly, though, Naoya had no desire to move from where she stood. It's probably just that she couldn't handle the bitterness of jujitsu training, and went to hide in some corner crying her eyes out. When she gets hungry, she'll come scampering out on her own. She tucked both hands into the sleeves of her kimono and muttered the words half to herself, but before she had finished speaking, her hand was caught and yanked clean out of her sleeve by Maki, who proceeded, without bothering to ask permission, to drag her bodily out the door. The territory of the Zenin estate was, in one sense, vast, nearly an entire deep mountain range, all of it firmly enclosed by the family's barriers, transformed into private ground upon which no outsider was permitted to set foot. And yet in another sense it was small. People couldn't really wander aimlessly across barren mountains and wild ridges. The areas where the clan actually clustered together and built dwellings amounted, all told, to only a handful of spots. Her right hand dragged ruthlessly along in Maki's grip. The two of them tore through the courtyards and halls of the Zenin estate. Naoya could only feel that she had been dropped, undeserving, into the middle of someone else's calamity, helpless to do anything but watch as Maki barged about without the slightest restraint, yanking open a paper door here, shoving open a wooden shutter there, hollering at the top of her lungs and sending the women and children of the inner residences scattering like startled chickens. "Where are you? Sis Naoya is back. My, come out already. Has anyone here seen my little sister? What was the point of looking in a place like this? Hadn't they been told already that the girl had gone missing from Chujuru's side? From the moment they'd left the room, Naoya hadn't even had time to put on her wooden geta, and had ended up being towed barefoot across half of the Zenin estate's inner grounds. Watching that whirlwind figure in front of her, she rolled her eyes inwardly. What do we do? Mai isn't here either. Maki spun around urgently, but before she could finish her sentence she discovered that her arm had already been caught, and locked tight in Naoya's reverse grip. The big sister who had been letting herself be dragged along the entire way was now suddenly standing as still as if she had taken root in the floor, an immovable stone, not a single muscle twitching. What's wrong? Maki tilted her head, puzzled only to find that Naoya's gaze hadn't landed on her at all. Naoya's eyes were fixed, dead and unblinking, on something behind Maki's shoulder. Maki's heart tightened. She craned her neck to look, but all that met her eyes was an empty corridor, not so much as a shadow of another figure. Don't move, just now. And then, slowly, come around behind me. Naoya slowly raised her eyes, her gaze passing over Maki's shoulder and coming to rest at the far end of the corridor, where the passage was blocked from wall to wall by a great, gaping, blood-slick maw. The reek of carrion came drifting toward them on the through draft. Accursed spirit. No, a shikigami. Naoya stared steadily at that enormous mouth, set into the body of a creature mangy all over, shaped like some kind of feral dog, and a cold weight settled in her chest at once. Daring to release a shikigami inside the inner residences just like that, whose was this? She stood there turning it over for a solid 3 seconds, but in the end couldn't fish up a single relevant memory. After all, shikigami users were the most common type of sorcerer in the jujitsu world. Even certain people who had been born without any technique at all could, through diligent postnatal taming of rare cursed energy-bearing creatures found out in the wild, acquire shikigami of their own to command. Oi, we're trying to have a good time over here, and you're making a hell of a racket. One after another, have the women and children of this family really lost all sense of manners now? The dull thud of heavy footfalls boomed against the floorboards. Naoya turned her gaze toward the sound, only to see 5 or 6 men shoving and elbowing their way out of a room off to the side. The thick stench of liquor clung to them, their eyes were clouded over, they had obviously been drinking themselves blind. Maki couldn't see cursed spirits or shikigami, but she could plainly see this group of belligerent drunks. She gave a small startled jump, then quickly ducked behind Naoya, clutching at her waist, peeking out with only half her face exposed. The cursed energy of that shikigami was bound firmly to the body of the tall, lean man at the head of the group. He shoved aside the men beside him, and elbowed his way to the very front. A woman somewhat advanced in years, who looked like an attendant, came hurrying after them and bowed deeply to the assembled men. My apologies. My deepest apologies, my lords, I was momentarily lax in my watch, and let the children come running in here. I'll take them away at once. Before she had even finished speaking, the tall, lean man had given her a hard shove, and knocked her flat to the floor. The woman cried out in pain, and behind him the rest of the drunks burst out into raucous laughter, foul language pouring from their mouths along with it. Really now, we just heard the news that that bastard Toji had finally croaked, we were celebrating in high spirits, planning a proper party, and then we look around for someone to come pour our drinks, and what we get is some hag like you, without a shred of looks to her name. You women, all you ever see is the big shots of the hay squad to flatter, isn't that right? Damn it all, we work our backsides off too. Are you saying we aren't putting in any effort? And now you can't even manage a simple errand, and you've gone and spoiled our mood. The tall, lean man drawled his words out at a leisurely pace, glaring down at the woman hanging her head and silently weeping. He'd been about to curse her out a few more times, but then suddenly couldn't be bothered. His gaze first swept across Maki, hiding behind Naoya, then came to rest back on Naoya herself, standing in front of the shikigami. The corner of his mouth twitched up. Hold on. Who are you again? Never mind, it's not important. He took a step forward and used his chin to point at the snarling, fawn-bearing Shikigami. Just now, were you able to see my Pochi, HM? At last, you're not one of those stupid blind women. As he spoke, he raised a hand and pointed back behind him. Come, you're some junior from one of the family's lines, aren't you? Come over here and pour our drinks for us, and we'll let the whole business of you two making a scene and racket in here slide. His words landed, and he burst into a fit of utterly shameless laughter, completely failing to notice that, behind him, several of the drunks who had been laughing along with the jeering, the moment they got a clear look at Naoya's face, had snapped sober as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over their heads, panic churning in their eyes. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan. New history, Jujutsu x Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Chapter 70. I'm truly sorry. 1637 words. Cough cough cough. Older brother, this person, she seems to be the head's daughter. A few coughs broke through the haze of alcohol fumes. Several of the less drunk clan members suddenly shuddered, their drunkenness half vanishing in an instant, and they scrambled forward to grab hold of the tall, gaunt man swaying in front of them, lowering their voices in urgent warning. Don't go over there. That's the head's daughter. According to the usual rules of the Zenin estate, any child who could not become a sorcerer and contribute to the family was required to do everything in their power to prove their worth. They could not, under any circumstances, become a burden on the family. Once they grew a little older, the men, still possessing some measure of physical strength, would be dispatched to the Kokuru squad to do the grunt work on the battlefield, hauling heavy loads, clearing the aftermath, exchanging blood and sweat for a bowl of rice. The women, unable to slay enemies, could only manage the household in the inner quarters, raise the next generation, take in a husband, or marry into another sorcerer family, using childbirth to continue the family bloodline and shore up its alliances. Though this rule was never written down, it was implacably impartial. Whether direct line or collateral branch, for several centuries there had never been an exception. And yet this particular young lady was an utter anomaly. Rumor had it that she had been born with no aptitude as a sorcerer, and that under Naobito's doting indulgence, she had grown up with a personality that knew no superiors and feared no laws. For more than a decade, she had lived off the main Zenin household for free, never lifting so much as a needle in the women's quarters, and never, by anyone's account, having any betrothal arranged for her. And according to certain whispered rumors, whenever the matter of her marriage was raised at a council of the elders, even when a quite powerful branch family came forward to propose, Naobito Zenin would tear into them mercilessly and send them off. What made the clansmen angry yet too cowed to speak out, however, was the fact that she spent all day inseparable from those two whom the entire clan regarded as inauspicious harbingers of misfortune. No, not merely inseparable, she was blatantly, openly shielding them. For a time, gossip and slander spread through the main Zenin household, and in the end all the discontent pointed in one direction: the head of the family, Naobito Zenin, and his utterly unconditional indulgence. Big bro, let it go. What if she goes and reports it to the family? Hearing the urging by his ear, the tall, gaunt man froze for a moment, hesitation flickering across his face. But then, whether the drink had gone to his head, or what, he stiffened his neck and shouted noisily. I refuse to believe it. So what if she's the head's daughter? In all the centuries of the Zenin estate, where has there ever been a rule that lets a non-sorcerer trample on top of sorcerers? I'm going to enforce the family law right here, right now. I don't believe a mere non-sorcerer, that the head of the family would actually take it against me, just because she ends up dead at the hands of one sorcerer like me. Cursing and swearing, the gaunt tall man pushed aside the drinking buddies trying to stop him, and pointed sharply forward. Show her what's what. Teach her what discipline looks like. How interesting, said Naoya, who had been silent up till now. To beat up someone who in your eyes isn't even a sorcerer, and you have to call out a Shikigami for it. Don't you talk back to me. The tall, gaunt man waved his arm, and that enormous, mangy hound, its jaws looking as if they could never quite close, drool dripping from them, immediately let out a low growl and began to advance on her, step by step, on its heavy limbs. It was just then that Naoya felt a faint movement behind her. A small figure suddenly darted out in front of her, threw out a pair of thin, slender arms to shield her completely, and snarled like a small beast with its hackles raised, "You're not allowed to bully my sister. Shut your mouth, brat. In a minute I'll beat you up too." Maki glared fixedly at the gaunt tall man in front of her, fists clenched, baring her teeth in something like a display of defiance. Naoya found the sight rather amusing. After all, the girl didn't even know where the real enemy, the Shikigami, actually was. Lazily she lifted Maki by the collar and set her back behind her once again. "Don't get in the way." As she spoke, she walked slowly forward, lifting her face to gaze up at the ugly Shikigami. "About time, isn't it?" she murmured. "Weren't you all puffed up just now? Keep it up. I couldn't give Lady Naoya a proper show. My deepest apologies." In nothing more than the blink of an eye, the tall, gaunt man who had been so insufferably arrogant just moments before was now beaten black and blue, hanging from the eaves of the courtyard like a Tereboza doll. The pupils in his swollen eyes, so bruised he could barely open them, had already gone slack, and his mouth was muttering broken, meaningless words. As for the Shikigami, it too had been pummeled into powder by 24 heavy blows per second, dissolving into formless cursed energy. Whether it could ever be summoned again was uncertain, and if it never could be again, then who knew whether this fellow could still be called a sorcerer at all. Naoya paid the gaunt tall man no further attention. She turned her head toward the row of drunkards on the side, who had collapsed to their knees with their souls all but scared out of them, then sneered coldly, "What's the matter? Lost your tongues? Weren't you all having such a grand time just now? Weren't you celebrating Toji's death? Since it's a celebration, why don't you put on a proper show and keep going? We had eyes but failed to recognize the great mountain before us. We beg you, spare our lives." Naoya in his past life had been the captain of the Zenin family's Hey Squad, and looking at this useless rabble of subordinates, she instinctively slipped into her old commanding tone. The drunkards buried their heads even lower and dared do nothing but cravenly mumble their assent. Naoya folded her arms and slowly paced 2 laps on the spot. Then, as though suddenly recalling something important, she abruptly raised her voice. "Originally I was going to drag you out one by one and have you answer for your crimes, but now, I'll give you a chance to atone with merit. At your command." Though they had no idea what the crime was, having seen Naoya's fearsome strength, not one of them dared to object. "Go find someone. She'll be somewhere here in the main Zenin household. Go right now. Her name is Mai, and her appearance is—" Naoya paused, then casually pointed back at Maki, who was still standing there in a daze. "She looks exactly like her. Do not rest until you've found her, and don't even think about slacking off or trying to dodge the work. Don't imagine I won't be able to find you. No matter where you hide, I'll drag you out. And as soon as you find her, come straight back here to see me." The Zenin clan members, as though granted a great amnesty, scrambled up from the ground and were gone in the blink of an eye. Naoya watched their fleeing figures with a slight frown, then, glancing again, she realized that one person had actually remained on the scene. It was the Zenin family woman, who had earlier been waiting on them while they drank. Naoya had assumed she'd long since slipped away during the brawl, but coming back to her senses, she found her kneeling silently in front of the corridor, motionless, like a puppet awaiting its sentence. Naoya's gaze swept casually over her, but she couldn't be bothered with her, and turned to step into the drinking room beside them. The moment she crossed the threshold, however, she was driven straight back out by the scene of overturned cups and platters, and the sharp reek inside. "Go clean this room up. We're going to be waiting here for someone." Her feet had only just stepped back over the doorframe, her gaze searching out the woman, when she paused for a moment, for she saw the woman being helped up by Maki. "Taking the chance to get your revenge?" Naoya raised an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth lifting in a playful smile. After all, being bossed around by a useless wretch like that, it would only be natural to harbor some resentment. But in the very next second, the smile faded from her face. The woman silently walked over to beneath the eaves, stretched out her thin, frail arms, and with effort took hold of the gaunt man's dangling legs, bit by bit, trying to lower him down from the eaves. Seek, Walnut-chan new history, Jujitsu x Miyaruko. Oh no, am I a villain too? Let's hit these goals. 100 power stones equals 1 extra chapter for the public. Chapter 71, Mother bonus chapter, 1378 words I told you to come over here and clean up, are you deaf? Naoya Zenin spoke coldly. Maki tilted her face up, staring at her in a daze. She had never seen her sister look so callous. The woman slowly turned her head, looked at Naoya, then sharply averted her eyes. I understand, I'll just be a moment. I said immediately. Right now. Naoya spoke without an ounce of leniency. The woman glanced at the tall, gaunt man hanging from the eaves, and then slowly released her grip. With a soft thud, she stumbled forward a step or two. Naoya assumed she'd finally got the message, but the very next second, the woman dropped abruptly to her knees. Please, I beg you, spare his life. Who is he to you? Naoya glanced at the figure dangling from the eaves, and gave a derisive snort. With taste like that, no wonder you've fallen this low. The woman shook her head, pressing her brow to the floorboards, only repeating. Please, spare him. That's not right. Maki suddenly cried out, indignant, her small brows knotting together. I clearly saw him hitting you just now. Why would you speak up for him? If he keeps hanging like that, he'll die. The woman's shoulders trembled slightly. No matter what he's done, he doesn't deserve. Naoya's eyebrows shot up. So are you questioning me? Do you think I'd slip and kill him by accident? I wouldn't dare. Naoya stared at the woman kneeling on the floor, sneered, and waved a hand. Tell you what, I'm in a good mood right now. Give me a passable reason, and I'll let the two of you go. The woman fell silent, every now and again glancing up at the men beneath the eaves. At last she drew a deep breath and said quietly, he is my son. What's that supposed to mean? Is that a safe word? Naoya froze for a moment, half thinking this was some kind of titillating little game one played while pouring drinks. But the woman went on, hesitant and stumbling, because I was a useless woman. He was taken from me when he was very small, given over to one of the mainline sorcerer lords. He probably doesn't even remember me. Maki couldn't help letting out a startled cry. Naoya looked at the woman, and a wave of revulsion she had never felt before in her life suddenly rose up in her chest. Damn this body, she thought to herself, it's gone and made me soft, too. Don't be ridiculous, that kind of thing doesn't count as a reason at all. Whatever scrap of good mood she'd had a moment ago was gone. Naoya waved her hand in irritation, as if to shoo away something filthy. Get out of here, now. Take your son and get out. Don't let me see either of you again. Naoya took Maki by the hand and continued searching the Zenin estate for Mai. The two of them said nothing. What had just happened felt like nothing more than an unimportant interlude. The 3-minute technique limitation was no longer the shackle it had once been, and so concealing her ability further seemed to serve no real purpose either. She wasn't some kind of masochist. She'd been hiding her technique all this time purely out of necessity, for safety's sake. Now that those worries were behind her, naturally she ought to display it openly. After all, as a sorcerer, things became immeasurably more convenient, no matter what one wanted to do. Naoya didn't speak, only stood there in a daze, thinking. That woman, to protect her son, she'd actually dared to stand up to someone stronger than her. Even from a posture as feeble as that. How utterly absurd. The reason women couldn't measure up to men was precisely because their minds were ruled by trivial nonsense like that. Naoya Zenin had no particular impression of her own mother. Naobito Zenin wasn't a man with any especially keen taste for women, but he had a great many of them all the same, and her mother had simply been one of the more unremarkable ones. This wasn't strange in the slightest. Every sorcerer of the Zenin estate was the same. Having inherited an outstanding bloodline, they bore an even greater responsibility to pass it on. Where Naobito Zenin differed from the rest of the Zenin estate, was that he would give those wives who'd grown weary of the family a large sum of money, and send them off to live in ordinary society. Naoya vaguely remembered that her own mother had been one such case, leaving the Zenin estate when Naoya was very small. She wasn't even entirely sure whether the mother of this life and the mother of her past life were the same person. I'd say that's just as well, in fact, Naoya muttered to herself. There's no need for that at all, like Lady Oji, getting in the way more than helping. Maki suddenly halted in her steps and gave a small tug at her hand. Auntie, just now. The little girl lifted her face, her clear eyes full of confusion and unease. If you can't become a sorcerer, do you turn into someone like her? Probably. Maki tilted her face up to look at Naoya. If you can't be a sorcerer, you have to be bullied. Because you're too useless. So you can only lean on someone else, if not a husband, then a son. You marry into someone's home, and live off them, scratching out a meal in exchange. Listening to Naoya's words, a blank look came over Maki's face. Sis was so amazing just now. She paused, lifted her head, eyes glittering with anticipation. And what about will Mai also become a really amazing sorcerer? Everyone says she will. I doubt it, Naoya thought silently. She remembered Mai's useless technique, barely a step above having no technique at all. Wasn't it something like exhausting every drop of cursed energy in her body just to manifest a single bullet, once a day, no different from one fired from an ordinary handgun? Only me all along, I've been unable to see anything. I don't want to be useless. It'll be hard, Naoya answered absently on reflex. You can't even see cursed SPI. Halfway through, she abruptly shut her mouth. Then what do I do? What's a girl with no cursed energy supposed to do? Maki blinked, asking the question with utter earnestness. Find someone to marry, of course. Naoya looked at Maki and spoke with deliberate malice, curious to see how she would react. Sure enough, Maki's small face screwed up bitterly at the words. I don't want to. If I get married, I'll have to be separated from Sis and Mai. Maki has to become a sorcerer, that's a pretty thought. But what if you can't? You'll still end up having to marry someone, won't you? Naoya sneered. What if? What if I really can't? Maki asked, her face crumpling in distress. That'll absolutely never happen. My advice to you is to make up your mind sooner rather than later. Naoya was not in the least moved by the naive fancy. But if it really did come to that. As she spoke, the little girl ran a few small steps ahead, then turned back and suddenly said, with a smile, I think I'd just have to marry Sis. If it's marrying Sis, that wouldn't be so bad either. Pure nonsense. All Naoya's interest evaporated. She just lowered her head, tugging at her hair, and muttered to herself. Lady Naoya, Miss Mai has been found. Those Zenin clansmen had not, it turned out, been entirely useless. As the sun was sinking toward evening, Naoya saw them coming back, Mai brought along with them. On a stretcher. Battered all over. Unconscious. Plus 40 ch, Walnut-chan new history, Jujitsu x Miyaruko, oh no, am I a villain too? Let's achieve our community goals. 100 Power Stones equals plus 1 extra chapter for everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.